What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was locked away as a child and returned with the power of the Reaper? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. He was so happy. Happier than he had been in a long time. The old man finally had time to take him outside for his birthday. He had every reason to be happy, but deep down he knew he was giving the old man trouble. For some great, unknown reason, the citizens and ninjas of Konoha hated him with enough passion that their glares would make his skin burn and peel if it was possible. However, before any harm was caused, the people glaring at him would suddenly become victims of an intense headache. For many weeks doctors were baffled on the topic. That is until some good, upstanding villager would claim that he saw the vile demon lurking in the shadows. Not to say that the part about lurking in the shadows was true. However, this caused his life to be more hectic. Why would people call him a demon? Why would people abuse him? The answer was simple. He was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, the infamous demon container of Konoha. Naruto was a young 8-year-old boy who had bright blonde hair and 3 whisker marks on both sides of his face. He was currently wearing an orange shirt with a white jacket on with his signature swirl on the back and a pair of black pants. "Thank you, old man," said Naruto as he happily slurped his ramen. Over the 8 years he was alive, he grew an addiction to the salty snack. The young boy and the Hokage were currently at Naruto's favorite ramen stand, Ichiraku Ramen, dining on miso ramen. "No problem, Naruto," the old man replied as he watched Naruto suck the noodles into his mouth with an amused expression. Sarutobi sighed in his mind. This was the least he could do for Naruto, especially on his birthday. Sarutobi was deep in thought, when suddenly Naruto's nose started jetting out ramen broth. The old man started laughing as Naruto got up, still sputtering with the broth trailing down his nose. "You better not tell anyone else about this, old man," Naruto shouted. Sarutobi, finally done with laughing, gave Naruto an appraising look before saying, "Oh? And why would I do that, Naruto?" Naruto got up, patting off invisible dust specks, and proudly declared, "Because I'm gonna kick your ass, old man, and become Hokage." "Well, Naruto, how can you be Hokage if you're on the ground?" Sarutobi chuckled. Naruto got up and went back to eating his ramen before saying, "Don't you worry about that, old man. Don't you worry about it." In a dark place, a young girl started happily laughing at the boy's expense. "I still don't see how you think you'll manage to beat me, Naruto," Sarutobi replied. Naruto gained a mischievous grin and said, "I know all about you and those books, old man." Sarutobi gulped, and nervously said while pulling on the hem of his Hokage robes, "Let's not be hasty, right, Naruto?" Naruto continued slurping his ramen, content with beating the old man while wearing his foxy grin on his face. He was quite pleased by the turn of events on his birthday. So far no one had given him any of those death glares or called him a demon. He decided to start a conversation with Tucci. "Hey Tucci-san, where's Ayame-ni-chan?" Naruto wondered while still slurping his ramen. "I gave her the day off, so she could spend some time with her friends during the festival," Tucci said as he continued to check the ramen. Sarutobi got up, motioned for Naruto to come with him. Naruto gave the Hokage a frown. "Hey old man, why are we leave? I was just finishing up my 20th bowl of ramen." Sarutobi gave another chuckle at the young boy's brashness. "Well, Naruto, we could either go get you your birthday gift or we can spend the rest of my budget on ramen," Sarutobi said. Behind the Ichiraku counter, Tucci gave Naruto a thumbs up, while Sarutobi just scowled. He, sorry Tucci-san, but I'm gonna go get my present." Naruto jumped up and started running after the old man. By the time Naruto has caught up with Sarutobi, he was smiling. Not one of those horrible fake smiles he often gave, but a true genuine smile. Sadly, little did Naruto know that this was going to be his last smile in a long time. "So Naruto, what do you want for your birthday?" Sarutobi inquired, while taking long puffs from his pipe. "Well, old man, I would like a set of training kunai, a set of training, a pair of headphones, a bag of flour, and some hot sauce," Naruto happily said. Sarutobi nodded at the first 2 requests, but headphones, a bag of flour, and hot sauce. That did not sound good to him. Sarutobi quickly gave Naruto a questioning glance, expecting an answer. Naruto quickly responded, Not wanting to lose his opportunity to receive birthday gifts, I want the headphones because I enjoy music, but the bag of flour and the hot sauce for pranks. Naruto grinned, nervously waiting for the old man to respond. Sarutobi was deep in thought. Some may have thought more about the flour and hot sauce, but Sarutobi was more interested in the headphones. He did not know that Naruto loved music. Little did people know, but Naruto loved anything had a beat to it. It could be the drips of rain against his apartment's roof during a heavy storm, or the sound of a bird singing a beautiful melody. Now some may wonder how Naruto developed his love of music. Music was the only thing that truly soothed Naruto when the nights were dark and unforgiving. Naruto was an enigma. While it was human nature to fear silence, he embraced it. It was only natural for a supposed demon to enjoy silence since it went in hand with darkness. Sarutobi referenced Naruto's love of music in the back of his mind as they continued their walk. He noticed that the villagers were eyeing him and Naruto, but thought nothing of it. The villagers seethed, how dare that demon corrupt their beloved Hokage? The villagers continued watching, careful not to show any sign of hate on their faces. How dare it possess the gall to show its face on the night of the Kyuubi festival to mock them all and the Yondaimi's sacrifice. Soon the villagers started whispering into each other's ears, planning the demon brat's demise. They all came to a decision rather quickly to meet up again in 3 hours while gaining more members for their plan and arming themselves for tonight's activities. After much trouble, the Sandaime managed to convince the electronics store owner to hand over the pair of headphones. After leaving the electronics store, Naruto and the Hokage ran into the Hyuga, Akamichi, Aburame, Yamanaka, and the Inuzuka clans. Naruto was happy that he got to play with other children his age. The children were currently playing a game of ninja tag with Naruto hiding while the rest of the children searched for him. However, the children did not know that Naruto was a master of stealth. Many Chunin had searched for the young boy when he had pulled his latest prank, but found that he simply vanished into air. Now many would think that the boy had an elite ninja teach him such a technique. While this was half the truth, Naruto had learnt the technique after meeting a civilian boy that was considered an outcast. One day while hanging out with his friend that he had dubbed Lizard, due to not knowing his real name sadly, a group of bullies came by looking for Lizard. Needless to say, Naruto kept his mouth shut hoping that Lizard would be okay, and told the bullies that Lizard had run the other way. Naruto's jaw dropped to the ground when he found Lizard still next to him. When Naruto asked how he pulled that trick off, he replied, "Over the years I have become a master of stealth." This made Naruto widen his eyes and he immediately asked his friend to teach him the art of stealth. Lizard happily agreed and began teaching Naruto. Naruto quickly picked up on what his friend Lizard called just hiding, but Naruto decided that such a technique name was lame, so he renamed it to shadow melding. However, Lizard told Naruto to always keep in mind to hide in shadows is easy, but to hide in plain sight is a truly amazing feat. Naruto thought it was strange though that Lizard could hide so well due to his large size and the way he stood out. Physically he had a hunched back, much like a lizard. Naruto noted, pale white skin, and dark, curly hair. It saddened Naruto though when he found out Lizard was moving to some other ninja village. Well, back to the party, the young heirs of each clan found themselves exhausted. They looked for Naruto underneath every rock, every patch of dirt, and they even climbed up the trees to find him. Hell, they had even tried using Akamaru's supreme nose to find Naruto, but it was all useless. Hinata even used the Byakugan as well. Exhausted, Kiba fell down and shouted, "Naruto, come out. We're done looking. We give up." "Ha, I knew you couldn't find me. I'm the best there is at hiding," Naruto happily exclaimed. The rest looked at Naruto with looks of awe and surprised faces as Naruto seemed to suddenly emerge right in between them. Kiba looked shocked that Naruto was always this close to him. Hinata looked at Naruto's smile, and a small blush emerged on her face. Neji still couldn't believe that someone had defeated the almighty Byakugan, no less Naruto. Shikamaru muttered, "Troublesome," while Choji just sat down and started eating a bag of barbecue-flavored potato chips. Ino's eyes began twitching that she, the world's most beautiful and talented kunoichi, had failed to locate a boy right next to her. In a dark place, a young girl was smiling widely at the boy's achievements. On the far side of the area the young kids were playing, the adults were drinking and eating. Hiyashi started to initiate a conversation with the Hokage. Hokage-sama, you know you are taking a great risk by letting Uzumaki-san out on the night of the Kyuubi festival? I have faith in this village Hiyashi, that they will not attack Naruto on his birthday. Sarutobi said, taking a long draw of breath with his pipe still in hand. With all respect Hokage-sama, I think that you place too much trust in the villagers. Not that I care about Uzumaki-san, I think this is an error of judgment on your part, Hiyashi respectfully noted. Meanwhile the rest of the adults decided to join the conversation as well. Yay Hokage-sama, agree with Hiyashi on this issue. It was a mistake to bring the child to this event, said Sume Inuzuka. Not that Sume was against Naruto, she was just concerned for the young boy. Enough, Sarutobi said with a slight groan on his face. This party is to celebrate the defeat of the Kyuubi and to remember the Yondaimi's sacrifice. Everyone mentally frowned at Sarutobi's misplaced trust in the villagers. They knew Sarutobi was not a fool. Had he gone senile in his old age? Well, back onto conversation, said Choza, attempting to break the tension in the air. Luckily Inoichi noticed that the Uchiha were not present. Where is the Uchiha clan? He questioned. Finally everyone noticed that their favorite group of brooders was not present. Sarutobi finished blowing on his pipe before answering. I had received news that the Uchiha clan would not be joining us this evening. Sarutobi remarked. Back on the other side of the clearing the children were laughing and talking. Naruto had even managed to get Neji to chuckle after launching a stink bomb at Kiba and Akamaru. What the hell, Naruto? Shouted Kiba as he playfully punched Naruto. Hinata smiled meekly, while Shikamaru just said, troublesome, and Choji still munching on his chips. Naruto was a very happy boy right now. This was the greatest day ever. The old man had bought him a ton of ramen, some new gear, and a set of headphones. He had even met some new friends as well. While Kiba was loud and brash, Naruto could tell he had an unwavering loyalty to those that were his friends, a rare trait to see in people. He could tell that Hinata and Choji were both good kind people that had gentle demeanors. Shikamaru and Ino though, all Shikamaru did was say, troublesome, but Ino would fuss over this, Sasuke Uchiha. Suddenly, he felt like something bad was going to happen to him soon. Nah, nothing bad is going to happen to me. I haven't even done anything wrong, yet, he giggled to himself, thinking of new pranks. However, Naruto still had that gut feeling and couldn't shake it off. 2 hours until Operation Fox Trap. The villagers were arming themselves with anything they could get their hands on. They were equipped with good old pitchforks, knives, and heck even one guy had made a couple sake bombs. Tomo! Shouted one of the villagers, stop fooling around with those sake bombs. The one named Tomo grinned sheepishly and started poking his fingers together. The others rolled their eyes at him. When something went amiss you could always say Tomo did it. The villagers were all gathered around a table thinking of possible variables that would hinder their progress when they executed their plan. They had to make sure that their plan had to succeed. Or die trying. They were all doing this for one goal, one reason. They wanted to avenge those lost when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. The villagers were arrogant but not stupid. One of them spoke up and made a good suggestion. The others all nodded their heads with agreement and satisfaction. They were going to go get some professional help. Naruto and the Hokage decided to leave the party in order to go to the actual festival part of the celebration. Naruto jumped up and down in anticipation to play some of the games. Hey old man, let's go to that one. Naruto pointed towards a gold fish scooping stand. Luckily for Naruto the stand manager was no demon hater. The man was courteous and kind. Sarutobi deep inside was very thankful since he did not want to deal with another hater. Naruto eagerly picked up the fish scooper and went after the largest fish immediately. Naruto was in fact so excited that he thrusted his arm so violently in the water that some of the water spilled out of the tank. The owner of the tank chuckled at Naruto's antics and waved away Naruto's constant flow of saris. Somehow, amongst all the confusion Naruto managed to capture a goldfish as well. The owner smiled brightly and gave Naruto a blue ball as a prize. Thank you, Naruto said as he started bouncing the ball. Sarutobi smiled at the owner and slipped him an extra tip. Naruto and Sarutobi both grinned as they walked away from the stand. As Naruto and Sarutobi walked away the stand owner's eyes flashed yellow. Not a bright yellow or a darker yellow. but a sickly, pale yellow while he stared at the pair leaving. Naruto loved playing with the bouncy rubber ball. In fact, he even considered it untouchable, his way of saying that the said item could not be used in pranks. Sarutobi watched the young boy from behind, slowly moving, but still keeping up with Naruto. If a higher-ranked shinobi were to take note of the Hokage's posture, one would see a fatigue and exhaustion. To tell the truth, Naruto has exhausted the Hokage with his infinite stamina. Not to say it was all Naruto's fault, but as the Hokage he had to work 24/7,365. Not to mention the bullshit that the council was suggesting and the trouble concerning the Uchiha clan. The council was still a pain in the ass. He seriously needed to obtain enough votes to oust Homura, Koharu, and Danzo from the council. Every day he heard things like, "We must execute the demon," or, "The demon must be detained with Anbu-level security," and, "Sarutobi, I demand that you capture that demon," which usually followed with applause mostly coming from the civilian council. And Danzo, don't even get him started on him. The man was like a small child always asking for something he wanted. These days he had stopped supporting Naruto's death, but now kept asking to train him. In his mind he mimicked Danzo. "Let me train the boy. He says blah, blah, blah." Sarutobi mused to himself in his head. He was getting way too old for this shit. Then finally there was the Uchiha clan. He knew what the clan was up to and he did not like it one bit. Good thing he had a spy on the inside. Sarutobi was well prepared as the Uchiha acted out. He had his Anbu and his elite Junin. However, there was one last method he did not want to resort to. Sarutobi kept on thinking until Naruto's voice brought him out of his musing. Old man, Earth to old man," Naruto shouted. "Let's go over there." Naruto pointed to the funhouse. Once inside the funhouse, Naruto kept jumping up and down in front of the mirrors. Naruto watched, fascinated by how his reflection was so tall and big. However, from behind Naruto a mirror opened. It revealed a gloved hand wielding a kunai. The would-be assassin though was quickly intercepted by the Hokage. The assassin yelped as the Hokage broke his wrist. While Sarutobi was old, that did not mean he did not still have it in him to break a couple bones. "Unhand me, Hokage-sama," the man said. Sarutobi just looked at the man with disdain and disgust on his face. The civilians' courageousness or stupidity made Sarutobi wonder if most, if not all, civilians were this stupid. Not many people were crazy enough to attack the young demon container while the Hokage was accompanying him. It was like something made them incredibly stupid when young Naruto was around. "And why would I do that?" Sarutobi said, glaring at the man. The civilian gulped, trying to settle himself, before proclaiming, "So, I can finish off what the Yondaime started and become a hero." "You think killing a defenseless child is a way to become a hero?" The Sandaime barked, furious at the entire affair with the civilian's pig-headedness, and slowing raising his killing intent level to alert the Anbu. "The boy is the Kyuubi in disguise, Hokage-sama. Do not let the demon deceive you any longer. Continued exposure to his malevolent chakra will lead to loss of hair and liver spots," the civilian said while he continued listing all the hazards of being near the Naruto. The man continued blabbering, saying, "Not to mention random combustion." The man suddenly stopped midway in his rant and studied the Hokage, eyeing him up and down with a raised eyebrow before a look of shock appeared on his face. Hokage-sama," the man stuttered. "The symptoms of prolonged exposure have already begun. You are losing hair, gaining liver spots, and—" "Enough," Sarutobi said to the man and punched him in the face, breaking his face in the process. Behind Sarutobi, the two Anbu behind him were snickering and trying to cover their snickers, but failingly horribly. Sarutobi turned to both glaring daggers at the two. Meanwhile, Naruto was watching the entire exchange from the end of the funhouse hallway. He was secretly laughing inside that the guy that tried to attack him started insulting the Hokage. And to top it off, the old man knocked the shit out of that guy. Serves him right. He should not have called me a demon, Naruto thought to himself while wiping the tears from his eyes. "I'm sorry, old man," Naruto sighed. "Every year on my birthday people always come to kill me." Naruto looked downward to his feet. Sarutobi. As Naruto and Sarutobi exited the funhouse, they noticed there were quite a few people still around even though it was late. Mentally noting to watch out for suspicious people, Naruto asked Sarutobi to get him home. Sarutobi solemnly nodded, noticing Naruto's concern, but surprised at the boy's skill at environmental detection. Sarutobi looked down at his watch. Naruto's apartment was a little bit over an hour away. This left Sarutobi some good ol' icha time when he returned to the tower. Naruto noticed a slight nosebleed and blush on Sarutobi's face. "Hey old man. Get your mind out of the gutter." Sarutobi looked slightly embarrassed, but quickly moved his head to the side to get rid of his nosebleed and regaining his composure. "You say something, Naruto?" Sarutobi asked with a smile with the remnants of a blush on his face. Naruto scowled at him. "You don't fool me, old man," he proudly declared. Naruto and Sarutobi were now walking through the market district. Naruto looked around nervously. The same people who were back by the carnival stands were still there, one step behind him. While the atmosphere was still calm, Naruto felt rather threatened by his stalkers. Sarutobi, on the other hand, decided to do a quick chakra exercise, which involved expelling chakra from every tenketsu point on one's body to create a map to navigate through the area, like a sonar. He took in a deep puff from his pipe. Today's flavor was cherry. Sadly, Sarutobi's enjoyment was interrupted as an Anbu member body flickered in front of him. "Bore with urgent news, Hokage-sama," relayed the Anbu. Sarutobi furrowed his brows. He hoped it was something important. "The Uchiha clan has been massacred." Sarutobi looked unsurprised, almost as if he suspected he knew it all along. His pensive moment was ruined as the Anbu asked for orders. "Surround the village perimeter and gather all the Anbu. I will be coming with you," Sarutobi ordered. The old man turned to Naruto, saying, "I'm truly sorry, Naruto, but it seems that a grave emergency has come up that requires my utmost attention." Sarutobi's side body flickered away with the rest of his entourage. The atmosphere suddenly went from happy and cheerful to cold and angry. Naruto felt multiple sets of eyes on him. Hateful eyes. And with only the experience of resisting those cold stares, Naruto increased his pace, hoping to escape the hostile environment. Before he could go though, a drunken villager stopped him midway. "EHDD demon, what you think you doing in my house?" The inebriated man spoke. Naruto looked left and right before backing away slowly. What the hell was the drunk talking about, he thought to himself. The villager swung his hand while shaking his other hand that held his sake up and down. "I'ma teach you a lesson on breaking and entering, demon," the man slurred. "If I wasn't so tipsy right now I would get you with my sake bottle." Naruto continued, stepping backwards with a frown marred on his face. "Man, this guy is an asshole. I better get out of here fast, but I'll have some fun with him first." "Hey, you can't get me, you meanie. I'm way too fast for you." The drunk studied Naruto before smashing his sake bottle against a nearby table. Naruto swallowed. "I don't think you would hit me, right, drunkie?" "No, I'm gonna get you, boy." The man waddled over to Naruto. The drunk had a sheen of sweat covering his skin, making it seem like it possessed a shine. His eyes were somewhat glazed and cross-eyed. He charged and drew back his arm. The man's aim was true. He struck the ground next to Naruto, 10 feet away from he was standing. "Oi, demon sh, top moving so much. I sh where if there weren't more than one of you I would gut you like a flance." The man stumbled, looking for Naruto. At this point the passing terror that had gripped the young boy was long replaced with laughter and mirth. "Wow, drunkie, if you can't even hit an 8-year-old kid, I bet you can't even aim straight when you go to the bathroom." Naruto chuckled. "Well, yeah? Let's test that then, demon." The observers watching the event could only stare in horror as the drunken man attempted to relieve himself on the young boy. That is the other young boy that was standing behind the drunken man. The observers' faces were both disgusted and bewildered. Disgusted because the man had actually relieved himself on a child, and bewildered because somehow between the time the man was facing Naruto and unzipping his fly, he somehow ended up facing in another direction. To make matters worse, the man realized he missed his target and violently spun around to correct his mistake. By now many people that were observing the event had left sickened or found a nearby garbage can. However, when the man spun around he managed to hit 3 additional people, but still missed Naruto. Needless to say, the victims of the drunk's shower technique beat the shit out of the man. The next morning the man would find himself beaten and bruised, with most of the damage concentrated on his groin area. He would also be asking himself, what the hell did I do last night? Naruto used this time to stealthily escape from the carnage while containing his laughter. Wow, these guys are retards. 1 hour until operation. Fox Trap. The civilians were all headed to the all-shinobi bar. They had thought that, hey, I bet ninjas hate the Kyuubi too. Luckily they had been right when one of the bolder civilians went up to a drunken ninja and asked her if she hated the demon. The villagers could only assume that the man hated the demon because he said, "Fuck that shit." The villagers could only assume that the drunken ninja thought the demon was shit. Armed with this knowledge, the civilians headed towards the bar with the bolder ones in front and the scared ones in the back. They had chosen this bar because it was popular amongst demon-hating shinobi. As soon as the villagers stepped into the bar, it became silent with all eyes watching them. Ahem. The leader said to clear the remaining chatter in the silent environment. Hello, ninja of Konoha. I come here to ask for your help to complete a task. This got most of the ninjas' attention. Seriously, a large mob all behind one man to do a job? This must be good. What is this job, civilian? At this question the leader's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Well, today is October 10th. Surely some festivities are in order? The demon haters each gained a wicked smile. Of course they picked up the hint. Sure. Where are the festivities taking place? The civilians behind the leader were grinning from ear to ear. They had successfully gained some professional help to fulfill their collective dream, to see the demon die. This time the leader answered more seriously. The event will take place 1 hour from now. We shall ambush the demon when he is 2 blocks away from his lair. The only action that was visibly seen were the looks of unrestrained bloodlust and eyes that glinted manically. Naruto was walking calmly through the middle of the street. Cruel eyes bore into his small frame, sending heated glares and unrepressed killing intent. However, Naruto was not fazed at all. He was by far too used to the stares to affect him anymore, and the civilians' attempt at scaring him shitless was pitiful. He had experienced more killing intent from a run-in with the infamous Tora the cat. During that encounter blood was spilled. To this day Naruto still had faint scar marks on his arm from the clawed beast. Naruto responded to by sending a weak, but still strong enough wave of killing intent to scare the civilians shitless. To his pleasure, many of the civilians ran off screaming, "The demon raped my mind. I've been mentally violated." The weaker-minded civilians just fell down while simultaneously foaming from the mouth. Naruto just chuckled to himself before continuing walking down the street. However, he still had that pulling feeling at the back of his head. Nothing bad would come tonight, right? He relaxed himself by fingering the necklace he wore around his neck. The necklace was a gift from his friend Enko-chan. The necklace had purple and black beads on it and had a snake pendant on it. Naruto fondly remembered his encounters with the snake mistress. Flashback. 11 months back. The man's fist came down hard upon the small frame of the 7-year-old boy. Naruto screamed as the fist made impact with his skull, drawing blood. The blood flowed down Naruto's face, drowning his vision in a sea of red. Naruto sobbed, "Please stop. I didn't do anything." The man ignored his pleas for mercy as he pulled his leg back and delivered a brutal kick to Naruto's arm. The kick had such an effect on his body that there was an audible snapping of bones. Naruto bit down on his lip to prevent himself from screaming. In doing so he drew his own blood. He would not let this man have the satisfaction of making him cry. The man delivered another brutal kick, this time to his legs, making them snap and bend at a strange angle. "Demon, I'll end you. You killed my family. I'll send you back to hell, you piece of shit." The man screeched before drawing a kitchen knife. The man plunged his knife into Naruto's shoulder, releasing a torrent of blood that splashed onto his hand. The man used his other relatively bloodless hand and wiped his sweat-laced forehead. "This is it, demon. This is the part where I send you back to hell." The man cackled as he brought the wicked blade back again. Time seemed to slow as the blade descended upon Naruto. Defeated, Naruto closed his eyes in acceptance, waiting for the inevitable peace that death would offer him. Naruto waited for the blow to strike, his vision faltering. He waited for the sound of steel piercing flesh, but was rewarded with the sound of a scream. More specifically, a male scream. Naruto barely opened his eyes to see a feminine figure standing over the body of the now dead man. 4 days later at the hospital, Naruto awoke to the bright sun shining through the blinds of his hospital room. After further observing his surroundings, he remembers that he was in horrible accident. He lifts his arm and pulls back his hospital gown to see if there is no wound. To his pleasure once again his amazing healing factor had left him scarless. Naruto looks around his room pleased to find that the old man had filled a vase full of flowers. He leans his head backwards so his head meets the pillow, and he enters a trance as he ignores his surroundings. Naruto woke up to the sound of his door creaking, revealing the benevolent figure of the Hokage. Sarutobi smiles sadly at Naruto as he walks over to the chair placed next to his bedside. "How are you feeling, Naruto?" "To tell the truth, I feel really crappy, old man," Naruto blankly stated while the old man just looked away ashamed that he could not protect the boy. "For what it's worth, I am truly sorry, Naruto. Please forgive this old man for his inability to protect you." Naruto squint his eyes at the wizened old man before smiling brightly. "It's okay, old man. No one is going to put me down. Ever." Sarutobi chuckled at Naruto's good humor even after such a horrendous assault. Naruto suddenly closed his eyes and put his hand underneath his chin, occasionally rubbing his chin his index finger. "That's it, the lady who saved me. The purple-haired, pineapple lady." The Hokage's sweat dropped at the young boy's description of the recently promoted special Junin. "Do you want to know where she is?" the old man asked. Naruto nodded his head feverishly while scratching a patch of skin that his uncomfortable hospital gown had caused. Sarutobi began to think about where the bloodthirsty Kunoichi could be. It's about lunchtime, so she should be at that nice, little dango shop, across the street from the Hokage Tower. He gave his response to Naruto and before he knew it, the boy dashed right past him. Sarutobi chuckled before signaling for the hidden Anbu to come out. "So you noticed as well?" he questioned. "Yes, he will make a great ninja one day," the masked elite replied. A little while later, now in his orange attire, Naruto dashed down the street while many citizens growled at him or subtly attempted to trip him. As a result, Naruto flashed a peace sign right back at them and skillfully avoided the feet in his way. He finally made it down to a small stand with a medium-sized paper banner over it. The smell of fresh dango filled his nose. He walked into the stand and put on a big smile before sitting down to a woman devouring dango stick after dango stick. "May I sit down?" he asked to the woman. The woman continued to stuff her face full of dango. Naruto stared at her, taking it as a yes. The woman finished eating her dango before grabbing her cup of sake and gulping down a significant amount. She wiped her mouth before releasing a satisfied sigh. "What do y'all want, kid?" Anko lazily said while motioning the nearby waiter for more dango. Naruto looked down towards his feet, glancing at the indecently dressed woman with a furious blush on his face. "I would like to say thank you," squeaked the little boy. Anko looked at him impassively before her attitude did a complete turnaround. "You are so cute," she shouted before she lunged toward the little blonde and gave him a crushing hug, pushing the boy into her bosom. Naruto on the other hand by now was as red as a tomato and slowly choking to death. Anko slightly loosened her grip and brought her mouth to his ear. "You're so cute I could just eat you," she whispered and licked her lips. "Anko, stop teasing the kid already," the newly arrived 17-year-old Chunin said. Naruto lifted his head from the crazy woman's chest and looked at the young woman. She was very attractive, Naruto could tell that much. She had long, curly dark hair. Her skin seemed to be pale, but still rosy around her cheeks. She wore her Chunin vest over her dress of bandages and red shirt. She wore little to none makeup. The only visible sign of beauty product was the layer of red lipstick on her. "Ah, but Kurenai, I was having so much fun with my little friend here," the giggling woman said and put down Naruto. "So, how are you doing?" the Viper said. "I'm fine, we have another mission, I just wanted to tell you. I'll meet up with you tomorrow at the South Gate," she said, sitting down with Naruto and Anko. At this moment, Naruto felt it would be fine to interject into the conversation. "Thank you very much, Anko-san," Naruto shouted, bowing down on his knees with his head on the ground. At this point, many people were staring at the two with curious or snickering expressions. "Kid, get up, I was just doing what I do best," Anko quietly said, her eyes in another place. "Alright Anko-chan," Naruto shouted jubilantly. "Anko-chan, huh brat?" Despite this, Anko could not help but to give a small smile herself. This relationship slowly grew, with Anko rescuing Naruto every now and then, followed with some celebratory dango and sake juice box for Naruto. One day Naruto was just walking along, minding his own business when he was pushed down. The man who pushed him caused him to gain a very large gash on his arm. Sadly, the man had no such luck to succeed in killing our young hero, and ended up ball-less and battered, courtesy of Anko. Hey Naru-chan, what would I do if you keep getting hurt? You might not be as lucky next time, and could end up 6 feet under. Anko proclaimed. Don't worry, I'll never die. Naruto shouted. Anko developed a very large sweat drop behind her head before she interrupted a jumping Naruto. Well, as nice as that sounds, no one lives forever, brat. The snake mistress thought before shivering at the thought of her old sensei. She gained a faraway look, staring into the space before her. Not gonna die, not gonna die, not gonna die, not gonna die. Naruto exclaimed as he paraded around Anko, causing her trench coat to billow back and forth because of the mini cyclone that was Naruto. Anko suddenly gripped Naruto's shoulder hard. Don't do that, it's annoying, Anko said with a hardened voice before switching to a softer one. You promise? Yes, I do, Anko-chan. Anko smiled. Naruto had proven to her multiple times when she tried to sway him toward Dango that he had an indomitable will. Here, I want you to have this. She took off her necklace and looked at it briefly before taking his hand and pressing the necklace into his palm. Operation Fox Trap. Naruto walked down the dimly lit street with his bag swinging in his hands. He made sure not to make too much noise, so the civilians would not look outside and report him to the Uchihas. He turned around quickly, eyes narrowed searching for any possible movement. When content, he shrugged his shoulders and continued to walk. Little did he know, however, above the flickering streetlights were deadly shinobi ready to spring and below civilians hunched over dumpsters. Naruto walked around the corner before falling back and landing on his ass. Oh, I'm sorry, Naruto quickly said, and picked up his bag and ran his hands over his pants hard to slap off the dust. He finally looked up and strained his eyes in the dim light to see who he had bumped into. Naruto quickly paled before realizing who it was. In front of him stood a wall of angry and bloodthirsty wall of civilians. Shit, were the words that ran through his head before a dangerous silence consumed all other sounds. Beautiful night for a walk, isn't it, demon? The leader said before taking out a long stiletto and looking at it prospectively. And while you walk unharmed, he drifted on quietly. Our families lay dead and unfound. He finished violently before swinging the stiletto at Naruto. Naruto muttered a brief curse before ducking the blade and then turning on his heel, making a quick break by sliding underneath the open legs of the leader. He swiftly regained his bearings and dashed towards his hideout. Only 3 blocks away, he thought. Get him, the leader shouted, before the mass of civilians roared in approval and began chasing Naruto. Naruto looked over his shoulder expressing terror and relief as the civilians chased him. Terror because his small legs could not outrun the adults, but relief because some of the physically frail civilians began to fall to the ground, exhausted from chasing him. So that is why Naruto received a fist to the face in his moment of carelessness before fading out into unconsciousness. The young girl ran into a pair of open arms, which assured her that everything would be fine. Naruto woke up, his vision still blurry, but he shortly made out the figures in the darkness. Checking out his surroundings, he noticed that he was in a nearby alleyway, due to his intimate knowledge of the village's structure. He tried moving his arms, and to his surprise they were free. He immediately tried to move his arms and his feet, but only to meet waves upon waves of pain resonating throughout his body. He gasped before deeply exhaling, causing his small frame to heave up and down. So you noticed our nice, little adjustments, haven't you, monster? Asked the shinobi. Naruto looked the shinobi in the face, memorizing every detail about him if he ever made it out of the situation. What have I ever done to you? He half shouted, wincing as he made some more movements. The civilians and shinobi surrounding him scowled and frowned at his useless attempt to defend his person. Let me remind you then. The ninja took out a senbon before stabbing it into his shoulder. Naruto's eyes widened at the pain, but he held his voice, refusing to scream or moan for their sick amusement. Well, little demon, I'm not the only one who wants to have their payback for destroying their loved ones, so stay tight, right guys? The man moved aside, revealing the group of mean-looking civilians and ninja. Stay back, Naruto protested and raised his hand to hold them off, causing him a flash of white, hot pain. He pressed himself into the wall to his back, as if to make himself smaller, but it was inevitable. Fist rained upon him and brutal kicks yielded soft whimpers. Naruto tried to scrunch into a little boy, but his arms and legs were held back by two ninjas. Naruto watched in horror as a civilian doctor pulled out a wire speculum and drew it closer to his eyes. Naruto shut his eyes to stave off the cold device, but he opened them wide in pain as the two ninjas holding him added pressure to his body. The civilian doctor smiled in unadulterated glee as he plucked out Naruto's right eye and put said eye into a jar of preservative liquid. He giggled like a child as he shook the jar up and down, never noticing the eye had gained a four-pointed, slightly curved black whorl around it, leaving a ring of blue around his pupil. On the other hand, Naruto wailed in pain and sadness as he felt his eye depart from his battered body. He glared with his one good eye as the rest of the civilians had their share of fun. His world went black as one of the ninjas delivered a hard chop to his neck and he went off into La La Land. Naruto awoke to a ninja waving smelling salts underneath his nose. He crinkled his nose in irritation to the strong ammoniac smell that awoke him. His eyes suddenly shot up in realization. Where was he? More importantly, was what happened to him all real? He closed his left eye and opened his right. Only darkness. He wept bitterly for his lost, but bit back any noise he might have made. However, he had more important things to worry about, like where the hell was he? Naruto slowly took in his surroundings. He noticed he was tied to chair. He tried to struggle with his bonds, but was interrupted by the sound of a smirking ninja. "I wouldn't struggle if I were you," the black-haired civilian said, as he placed a mean-looking blade to Naruto's throat. Naruto immediately tensed. Upon further inspection he realized he was in a wide cave surrounded by many others. "Let me g," he sputtered, black liquid coming out from his mouth. In shock, Naruto was hit by a wave of nausea as he coughed up more of the black gunk. "Let me go," he enunciated more clearly. "I don't think so, besides you are the main event." The man maliciously chuckled. "Look around you." The man motioned, illuminating the room with his lantern. If Naruto could get any paler even from heavy blood loss, he would have as his eyes opened in shock as two shinobis began pouring kerosene all over the cave. Naruto was stunned by the overwhelming revelations of what was going to happen to him. Naruto suddenly started viciously thrashing, causing the man holding the blade to his neck to slightly slash his throat. Naruto would have gladly chosen a swift death, then burn. "You little shit," the civilian growled before placing his fist to Naruto's gut. While the punch wasn't anything spectacular in shinobi standards, it did the job in quieting Naruto. "Please don't do this. I'll do anything you want," Naruto rasped out. "Anything?" the civilian said thoughtfully. "Okay. How about you bring back all our deceased loved ones?" The rest of the ninjas and civilians all yelled in agreement, all knowing such a feat was impossible. Naruto bit down on his lip and let his head fall forward, shadowing his eyes. I can't do that," he shouted. "Oh? That's too bad. We were going to let you go if you could," the civilian said over his shoulder as he filed out of the cave. "Please stop," Naruto cried, tears shining brightly on his small, battered frame. And for a second some of the civilians and shinobi felt a sliver of guilt pang in their chest. Some realized that Naruto was but only a child, but that meant that they were wrong. The sympathetic members quickly stomped out any guilt from their bodies, for the truth of the matter was too great to bear. "Goodbye, monster," the civilian said before he took out a match, lit it then threw it into the cave. Naruto stared blankly into the backs of the civilians, praying for them to combust into flames, hoping for some sort of last vengeance. Naruto could only hope that someone would avenge him as he screamed harder while the flames eventually destroyed all he could see in a wave of heat. "I'm safe?" Naruto softly questioned to himself, as he breathed in heavily with his hands on the ground. His hands. He realized they were unscarred and smooth. He slowly reached up to his face and cried at the smooth skin. Carefully he brought his finger up to his right eye and to his great pleasure, he discovered it wasn't missing. Ha 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 ha. Naruto whipped his head around to see a figure sitting on a dull, gray stone throne. The man appeared to be tall if the size of the throne was any indicator. He wore a voluminous gray robe, more like a blanket sheet, Naruto noted, his skin a pale purple color. His fingernails were wickedly sharp and black in color, however, the most notable feature was his head, Naruto noticed. Adorned on his head were two long horns that jutted from the sides of his head. Red in color, they made his visage even more fearsome. The figure in question had yellow pupils surrounded by black. His teeth razor sharp and his tongue extraordinarily long, oddly enough, holding what would have been a sheathed, guardless katana. All these features made him look like the picture of death incarnate, seeing as he actually was death. Naruto's only reaction was to scream loudly and fall on his butt. "Now that is no way to treat the being that saved you," the man said mirthfully. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded. "Shouldn't you give out your own name before asking for others?" "Alas, I guess I shall indulge you, seeing as you are deceased and in my realm." "Anyway, wait, I'm dead," Naruto sullenly said. "I'm dead. I'm gonna get those mother." "Yes, I know. If you please be quiet now, I can explain your situation." Naruto seemingly deflated before holding his knees to his chest, looking utterly depressed. "You, Naruto, have a choice, seeing as some of my power is contained within you." "What do you mean your power is in me?" Naruto questioned, sounding somewhat apathetic, but interested. "Your father sealed the nine-tailed fox into your body, preventing it from destroying your village," the man said, getting straight to the point. "What?" Naruto exclaimed. Now, let's not pretend that you didn't know that you were the container of such a dangerous being," the man admonished. Naruto slightly quivered before releasing a long, shattered breath. Something akin to a sob, yet knowing, as if finally understanding a great message. "I always listened to what they said, even if I kept smiling all that time. I did some research and one thing led to another. I really didn't want to believe what I found out, but it was all true," he said with a note of finality. "My name is Naruto, sir," he finally said, still somewhat shaking. Good. I am the god of death, reaper of souls, guardian of the void, and the lord of the lower depths. If a snow could pale, the color would be that of Naruto's young face. What do you want from me?" came his shaky and uncertain reply. Now that's no way to talk to a friend. The Shinigami turned into the boy, lizard, and the game stall owner. "Wha?" came Naruto's dazed response. "Well, the way you're heading, you will be dead soon. So, I offer you an ultimatum of sorts," the death god said calmly, all whilst playing with his long, spiky hair. "Take it, take my power. Wield it, so that I may have presence once more." The death god whispered, his tongue moving and shaking in random directions like a serpent. Sitting there, Naruto thought over the offer, to live again? Another chance as the death god's avatar? Naruto thought about his entire conversation with the death god, until a shattering revelation came to him. Wait, the person who defeated the Kyuubi was Yondaime, but the Shinigami said my father. Oh god. My own father damned me. Naruto realized the final pillars holding him, violently shattering by the excruciating truth. The Shinigami watched, eyes full of mirth. I should really observe humans more often, they're such an amusing group, he mused to himself. So, your choice? The Void Lord patiently waiting for a response. On the other hand, Naruto was having a mental breakdown. All the values he saw sacred, the Sandame's values, were all broken. His father had betrayed him. No one loved him, or would put themselves in harm's way for him. With no one who cared for him, Naruto had nothing to lose. I accept, came his broken, sullen voice, wiping tears from his eyes that threatened to break out. While he seemed calm, the Shinigami was actually ecstatic, elated that he had obtained the child of prophecy before any of the other gods had. Being the god of death has its own perks, the dark presence thought to himself. Excellent, excellent. The Shinigami's voice boomed, echoing across the vast void. His tongue elongated and danced in front of Naruto before turning into stone and shattering. The knife, if it could be even called that, dropped in front of Naruto. Go on, take it. The Shinigami hissed, urging the young boy in front of him, as he remained contentedly seated on his throne of stone. Naruto picked up the sword-sized knife. The knife sword was sheathed in a black scabbard. Naruto pulled out the sword, surprised the blade itself was white in color. The blade's guard was a simple circle with the hilt wrapped in black bandages with ethereal runes inscribed on the cloth. However, the most interesting detail were the glowing blue runes. Naruto admired the blade with appreciation before thanking the god of death. What would you have me do, Shinigami-sama? Naruto said. I'll have you do whatever you want to do, Naruto-kun. The Shinigami delivered playfully. Not so fast. Naruto and Shinigami snapped their heads in attention to the direction of the voice. When the Shinigami saw the person in question, his lips curled into a smirk. Naruto, though, felt his heart nearly pop out of his chest. There in all his splendor, his glory was the Yondaime Hokage, and more importantly Naruto's father, Namikaze Minato. "You!" Naruto hissed at the Yondaime. Inside, Minato cringed at Naruto's tone. "Look, Naruto, I entrusted the Kyuubi to my son, so he would never be defenseless against his enemies. Naruto, my son, I love. Did you know that your father could have just banished the Kyuubi back to hell?" The death god smirked, causing Minato to pale. As if an arctic wind came, the void seemed to become even colder. "Don't say such empty words, Yondaime-sama," Naruto coldly said. "Naruto, please listen," Minato said, as he advanced towards Naruto, giving him a hug. Naruto froze as paralyzed from the contact. Minato himself felt Naruto stiffen and pulled him even closer. "Oh my son, what have they done to you? You have to understand, I did what I had to do to protect everyone as my job as Hokage." Minato avidly defended his actions. "Well, isn't it the Hokage's duty to protect everyone?" Naruto said angrily, borderline shaking with rage. "Naruto?" Minato looked conflicted. "I had to sacrifice you for the greater cause. Your son, your flesh and blood." Naruto shrieked emotionally into Minato's howry. "I hope you understand what I did, Naruto, please." Minato begged. "Oh, I understand what you did, Lord Hokage," Naruto said, suddenly cold and collected. "I forgive you for what you did as Hokage, however. Here comes the grand finale." The Shinigami thought gleefully to himself. "I will never forgive you for what you have done as my father." And with those final words Naruto pulled out the sword and pierced his father's shade through the heart. Naruto watched passive as he twisted sword, causing Minato to cough blood, before sliding the blade out of Minato. "NN Naruto, I," was all Minato could say before he died, still clinging onto Naruto's legs with his eyes glazed over. Naruto watched with fascination as Minato's body broke into numerous shards of light before disappearing. "Now that this is out of the way, you can return to your world. When you awaken you will have my power, which I will instruct you how to use properly. Beware, though, your physical state in here differs from your state in the outside world." The Shinigami relayed. Naruto stood there, his heart beating fast before he nodded his head, inwardly cringing at the vast pain to come. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly, thinking to himself, "You need some of my power, now." The Shinigami flung his arm forward, shooting a ray of miasmic yellow energy into Naruto. Naruto felt exhilarated as the energy coursed through his body, sending shivers down his spine. "I hope to see you again, Naruto-kun." "Ha ha 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 ha." The Shinigami laughed before settling down. You need a new name." Naruto Uzumaki was the past. "Let's see. I dub thee, Charybdis, my apprentice and heir." Naruto looked down to see his hands start to fade along with the rest of himself. "I can do this, I'm Charybdis, the ultimate survivor." The Shinigami stretched comfortably in his stone throne. He felt satisfied that his goal had been accomplished before looking upwards at infinitely stretching sky. Above the godly being was a large cage, almost like that of a bird cage with only a simple seal to hold the great beast inside. "Quite a show, wouldn't you agree?" The Shinigami gave a toothy grin. The great beast above him seemed to stretch inwards and outwards before taking on the form of a beautiful young woman with long blood-red hair adorned with hair ornaments. "If you hurt him at all, I swear upon my title as Empress, I shall utterly destroy you, death god or not," the fiery woman said, stroking the red-headed girl on her lap, who had red eyes from crying. My, what a temper, know your place, Kyuubi." The death god seethed, flaring his rather significant amount of power. The woman now, revealed as the great Kyuubi no Kitsune, stood her ground, eyes defiant against the god of death. He, the Shinigami chuckled. "I applaud your will, Kyuubi. For that I shall answer your question. I have no ill intent for the boy. I merely want to see where his path will take him now." Kyuubi was shocked that the death god knew her question before she even knew what it would be, a true testament to the omnipotence of the god below her. "Ah, well, it looks like it's time for me to disappear," the death god hummed before slowly phasing out of the mindscape. "Wait, I have more questions." The last thing Kyuubi saw though was the insane smile of the Shinigami cackling like madman. Sarutobi sat comfortably in his chair. It was quintessential to have a comfortable chair when your office was a second home and at other times a primary one. He picked up the remote on his desk and promptly pressed some buttons. He smiled widely as he felt his chair shift backwards, allowing for a more comfortable position. He grinned further as he activated the full-body shiatsu massage unit with heat capability. He did a dance inside his head on how he even got such an amazing chair. It's not like Danzo needed that drug money anyway. 1. It was a nice day, he noticed. The sun was bright and children could be found playing on playgrounds or taking refuge under the great trees of Konoha from the sun. It was a nice change due to the recent massacre of the Uchiha clan. Under heavy speculation and verification among the bodies of the deceased, it was determined that Anbu Captain Itachi Uchiha has wiped out his entire clan save his young brother, Sasuke. Young Sasuke was under heavy security in the Konoha hospital, resting there due to a coma. Doctors had come to the conclusion that it was a genjutsu-induced coma by the talents of the shinobi medical staff. What baffled Sarutobi was a genjutsu strong enough to cause enough trauma to incapacitate someone for a week. In his gut, Sarutobi felt unease about the entire affair. The entire clan's destruction laid heavily on his conscience. In the end, though, he had to choose the lesser of two evils. He quickly chastised himself for such negative thoughts on a wonderful day. It was on days like this that he found himself immensely relaxed. He had no paperwork and the civilian and ninja councils were both content. Ah, what a wonderful day, he thought to himself as he felt his entire body shake due to the massaging unit cycling. Suddenly, his grandpa instincts kicked in. He suddenly realized he hadn't heard or seen Naruto in almost a week. It was unusual that Naruto had not been in his office in at least 3 days. He looked at his clock mounted on the wall, a special made by a carpenter for his coronation of Hokage. It read 1 o'clock. I'm in the mood for some ramen. I might as well go get some lunch at Ichiraku now. Naruto will probably be there too. The old Hokage thought before he pried himself from the warm embrace of his chair. He decided to take the scenic route and walked out of his office. I'm going to grab some lunch. If something important comes up, then contact me. Sarutobi told his secretary. Hi, Hokage-sama, the pretty, young woman said as she adjusted her glasses on the edge of her nose. At Ichiraku ramen stand. Ah, nothing like the stunning views of the scenic route. He was glad to have taken the slightly longer route on such a wonderful day. Days like these made him wish that his wife was still alive to enjoy such an experience with him. Sarutobi walked down the path, passing peddlers selling their wares to children and the civilians and ninjas that greeted him with a smile. He finally arrived at his destination and graciously took a seat on the few stools. He looked over the rest of his fellow patrons, but was disappointed and surprised to see that the ball of sunshine was not there. Tuchi-san, the Hokage motioned the humble ramen cook over. I would like to order a pork ramen. He said. Upon further thought, he decided to order a miso ramen for Naruto as well. Sarutobi fingered the hem of his Hokage hat, thinking back to the circumstances in which he became Hokage. The Hokage was brought out of his reminiscing by Tuchi bringing his order of pork and miso ramen. Sarutobi smiled at the smell of the delicious ramen and quickly broke his wooden chopsticks apart. With a quick itadakimasu, he began to work the delicious noodles in his mouth. He brought the bowl to his mouth, slurping up some of the delicious broth. Sarutobi was so absorbed into the delicious meal, he quickly forgot about the cooling miso ramen next to him reserved for his surrogate grandson. Ah, delicious, I can see why Naruto likes ramen so much. An excellent job, Tuchi-san. The wizened old man complimented. I can't take credit for this batch, I had my daughter prepare it. Hear that, Ayame? The Hokage loves your cooking. Tuchi shouted to the back room. Really, now? The Hokage asked. She can't be more than 12. That's impressive. Whoever marries your daughter is going to be a very lucky man. The two men shared a hearty laugh together at the expense at Tuchi's cute little daughter. At this time Ayame came out of the back room red-faced, but to switch positions with her father as the new waiter. Hey, who's wasting ramen? The young girl asked, pointing to the bowl of cooled miso. Suddenly, Sarutobi got a wake-up call. Naruto had not been there. Tuchi was quick to realize as well and frowned. When was the last time you saw Naruto, Tuchi-san? The sandame questioned in a clammed, controlled cadence. About a week ago, on his birthday. I thought he was with you this entire time. Tucci responded, his frown deepening, revealing his few wrinkles. He turned his attention back to the ramen and began to stir it, something he did when he thought about something. I think you should go visit Naruto, Hokage-sama. Tucci said, all business. That would be a wise decision, Tucci-san. Sarutobi approved, before inclining his head in respect and leaving enough money to cover the 2 ramen bowls. Such respect was well deserved to a man that has poisoned more than 3 companies of Iwin with some misplaced ration bars. Sarutobi walked out of the small stand, before performing a single-hand signed shunshin to Naruto's apartment. At Naruto's apartment, Sarutobi appeared in front of the door in a flourish, causing leaves to scatter around him and a non-existent breeze making his robes ripple. This simple, yet impressive action caused the woman in front of him to jump out of her skirt and land on the floor on her rear. Oh, hello Hasa-san. Sarutobi said, as he helped the 30-year-old woman off the ground. I was just about to collect the Gaki's rent money, today is collection day. The woman revealed as the landlordess pointed out. Don't you have a key? The Hokage asked her, the quizzical look on his face as most landlords had a set of keys to their tenants' apartments. Yurherm, she cleared her throat, Hokage-sama, if you don't remember you made a stipulation in young Naruto's case. Ah, came Sarutobi's intelligent response. Well, without further delay let's see if Naruto is in. The elderly man dinged the doorbell and waited for a response. A minute passed. He's probably coming now, the Hokage said looking at the slightly disheveled woman. 3 minutes passed. Naruto, the old man shouted, before actually using a closed fist to wrap the door. He always found people were more attentive to a human-produced noise. 5 minutes passed now. Hokage-sama, why don't you just use your own key? The landlord suggested. Ah, good idea, Hasa-san. He nodded his head in agreement. Naruto, he shouted, we're coming in now. Sarutobi's key to Naruto's apartment had been a gift from Naruto himself. Sarutobi was touched by the gift. The key, in Sarutobi's opinion, was a symbol of trust between Naruto and himself. What made it so rare was the fact that Naruto did not trust many people. He remembered upon initial meeting Naruto, the boy was very cautious and mistrustful. To say that the boy now trusted him so much brought tears of joy to his eyes. The old man took out his keys and without further delay, opened the door. Sarutobi walked in with the landlordess, her head peeking over his shoulder. She swiftly took her place at his side. It looks like no one has been here in a while, Hokage-sama. The landlordess said. The Hokage observed the living room, the dust floating in the air only visible by the small amount of lights that peeked over the blinds, casting a sunny patch of light on the carpet. Sarutobi walked into the kitchen, sweeping a bony finger over the countertop. He brought his fingers to eye level, taking note of the coat of dust on his finger. Hasa-san, I don't think Naruto has been here in at least 5 days. Sarutobi noted. Do you think he's fine? The landlordess asked worriedly. I'm sure he's off doing something foolish, he said, trying to assuage her fears. Oh, you're probably right, Hokage-sama. The woman said, still looking nervous but relieved. However, inside, Sarutobi felt unsure himself. Where was Naruto? Was he okay? Did someone hurt him? Was he hiding? If he was, from who? From the corner of his eyes he finally noticed a corner of wallpaper curling outward. New wallpaper? Sarutobi thought to himself as he inspected the wall. Unable to ignore his suspicious side, Sarutobi pulled the corner of the wallpaper, ripping it away. What was written on the wall elicited a gasp from the landlordess. Sarutobi signed as he read the cruel words on the wall. Things such as demon, monster, killer, murder, and even whore were scrawled out in red or black spray paint. Too many questions, thought the Hokage as he brought his hand to massage his forehead. I'm going to go find Naruto, okay Hasa-san? Sarutobi told her. Of course Hokage-sama. She inclined her head in a display of respect, still looking at the walls. Here, he pushed a wad of bills into her hands. That should cover the rent for 2 months. Hokage-sama, I couldn't. The woman's indignant cries were unheard as Sarutobi exited the building, in a flourish of shunshin. The Sandame now stood in front of the apartment building, his hand cupping his chin in a thoughtful pose. He quickly reached into his robes to reveal a pipe, and brought it to his mouth. With a practiced flare of Kaden chakra, he ignited his pipe. So imagine his surprise when the end of pipe started crackling in a display of fireworks, startling the shit out of him. He was not amused. Oh, that troublesome boy, Sarutobi thought with faux anger. He quickly pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face of any ash from the small display of fireworks. Now, how do I retrace my steps after I left? Where did I leave? Sarutobi thought intensely. Aha, he said, snapping his fingers. To the market district. He then proceeded to take a cart there, hopping on to the back of a nearby cart. 2. At the market district. What a nice ride, he thought as he hopped off the back, and thanked the merchant. He was not exactly where he had left Naruto nearly a week ago. Now if I was Naruto, which route would I use to take home? From where he was it took maybe an hour to walk home at a civilian pace. He walked down the road, greeted by children and families. He nodded his head and flashed a smile here and there. It never hurt to get a better reputation. He had been walking now for 15 minutes if his mind clock was correct. He was about to search elsewhere when a small rubber ball rolled out in front of him. Hello, what's this? He thought. Wait, I remember this. Memories of Naruto squeezing and bouncing the rubber ball off the ground suddenly flooded his mind. Naruto wouldn't forget this ball. Sarutobi turned his head to the left, the direction the ball rolled from. His eyes caught the glint of something shiny in the alley. Sarutobi quickly prepped himself for the worst as he put on his Hokage face on. He treaded into the alley, picking up the glinting object that had caught his attention. His fears were confirmed as he studied the item. A pair of headphones he had gotten Naruto for his birthday. He felt his heart jump as he studied the bag that the headphones were in. The bag in question was sticky on the bottom. Sticky from what, though? The Hokage murmured to himself in his mind. The alley itself was dark. It was a somewhat narrow passage between two buildings. He quickly flung out his hand and pulled back the sleeves of his robe, revealing the wrinkled flesh of his arm. He concentrated Kaden chakra in the palm of his hand just enough to create a small fireball to illuminate the alley. Oh, Kami? Came Sarutobi's soft response. He viewed the alley now, spatters of old, browning blood decorating the corridor. He reached down onto the ground and scraped some blood off of the bag. Definitely a week old, the Hokage concluded, as he rubbed the dried blood off his thumb and index finger. He briefly flared his chakra and to his expectations, 2 Anbu kneeled before him. Get me our best trackers and any other ninja with any skill at tracking. The Hokage schooled his features into a cold rage. One person couldn't do this. Whoever was involved with this will have the great pleasure of meeting Ibiki. Come, the Hokage commanded, we're starting a search. 6 days before the search, 1 day after death, Naruto woke up underneath the shadow of one of the large trees Fire Country was known for. It was now nearly sundown. From what he could tell he was asleep for a little bit less than 30 hours. He began to move and stretch, rising from his long sleep. He winced in discomfort as his skin cracked, seeping through his black bandaged body. He looked down at his arm expectantly, the area he had stretched, to see the red fluid that would undoubtedly flow out. So, he was freaked out to see black ichor seep down his arm. He watched it pool on the ground, like some sort of miracle puddle. He was suddenly reminded that he was bleeding. Okay, so if I move too quickly, I'll bleed out from every part of my body. Naruto summarized. He carefully grabbed his sword and got up, and began walking north to whatever destination fate would take him. Naruto never realized the sickly yellow, dying grass he had been sitting on and the family of dead mice a couple meters away from him. The search, present time. Sarutobi was very troubled. The search had led them all around Konoha. Apparently, someone had the opportunity to take a bucket of Naruto's blood, and randomly paint discrete red swabs in small, unnoticeable places. Sarutobi promised whoever was involved with this was going to get a long session with Ibiki and a vengeful Anko. Sarutobi wept for the poor girl, betrayed by his former student and son figure, and now this. Hokage-sama, the Sandame turned to face Inuzuka Hana, one of the star trackers in her clan, motioning for her to report. Hokage-sama, I can pick up at least 5 other scents, but they are all probably dead ends. However, there seems to be a stronger scent to the west. Stronger scent means more blood. The Hokage though absent-mindedly before following Hana in a shunshin. They both arrived at the scene of the crime. Like the original area he initially found Naruto's place of assault, this area had a fair amount of blood layered on the ground. Inuzuka-san, can you find any other scents? The Hokage questioned. It's faint, but there are about 3 other scents I can pick up. She quickly ordered her 3 nin dogs to pick up 1 scent per dog. Lead the way, the Hokage commanded. The closest scent is 3 blocks away. Seeing no need to wastefully use more chakra, the Hokage and his nins broke into a comfortable dash towards the apartment. 6 days before the search, 1 day after death. He couldn't have been walking for more than 1 hour now. His walking pace, in his opinion, was unbearably slow, but after some practice he found a gait that allowed him to walk a little fast and served to make his footsteps silent. His feet made barely any noise as he crossed over a patch of dead leaves. To his surprise, Naruto found he was not hungry. Does it have anything to do with what I am now? He thought. Naruto finally made it out of the forest and into a clearing. He saw a familiar man-made path, probably leading to civilization. He thought, before checking his right. To his shock and anger, he found himself back at the cave, which the mob burned him. Rage surged through him as he thought of their cruel, uncaring faces. The next thing he saw made him silently fume. In front of the cave were sticks of incense. Probably for the poor child that the Kyuubi took over. Naruto cleverly pieced together. It was messed up. How could a mob of people burn a child to death, then have the nerve to light incense for said person they killed? What's this? Naruto said, as he picked up the plastic-covered package. He tore off the wrapping and unfolded the object underneath. A funeral robe? Naruto wondered about the white garment. Well, at least they were useful, the fools. He thought as he put on the white robe, tightening the sash that came with the robe around his waist. The robe was a little bit too big in general, but he was sure that he would eventually grow into it. Let's find some shoes. The search. Sarutobi walked up the stairs, using the railing to support himself. His Anbu followed after him, the shuffling of feet making some of the more experienced in the building wonder about the large group. He finally stopped at the door, his helpful tracker sniffed out. He would be sure to give her raise for her job well done. Apartment number 4C, he noted. Without further delay, the Hokage rapped his fist on the door slowly, almost like one of those cinemas where something awful would happen. In this case that would be true. Hirano Masa, the Hokage shouted. Open this door right now. Hold on, Ka-san. Came the man's shout, heard through the door. Behind him, his Anbu snickered at the misidentification of their lord. Sarutobi shot them all a withering glare, showing he was not in the mood for any of this silliness. The Anbu fidgeted nervously, before becoming all business. Hey, Ka-san, I didn't think you would come so soon. The man answered the door. He then realized his mother was not in front of him. Crap. Instead, it was the Hokage. Why would the Hokage be at his door unless? Shit, he thought. I'm sure I got rid of my entire presence there. Fuck. Masa mentally grimaced. The Hokage, not missing a beat, proceeded to start a rapid-fire interrogation against the man. Where were you on October 10th? The Hokage barked. Drinking WI. So, when did you find Naruto Uzumaki? ID. Who else was with you to kill Naruto Uzumaki? Hokage-sama. I then. That's the problem, you don't. Where did you take him? I want a law. I am the law. Where did you kill him? The Hokage was by now yelling. Cool as an ice cube, cool as an ice cube, cool as an ice cube. Masa kept repeating his mantra in his head despite sweating bullets of sweat. I didn't kill him. Then who killed him? The Hokage pressed on. No one killed him. Masa lied through his teeth rather badly. Who killed him? Fine. We killed him, okay? We took him into an alley and beat him to bloody pulp. That's all I know. I left the main group because I was tired. I had my go at him anyway. Around him the Hokage and his Anbu absorbed this information before the most intense blast of killing intent was leveled at his person. Masa began to foam at the mouth. He checked his pants and found he has soiled himself badly. Oh, phew, were the only thoughts that Masa was able to form as the Hokage delivered an earth chakra-enhanced fist into the bloody hole that was now Masa's face. Disgusting pig. The Hokage shared his thoughts with his subordinates who all agreed with the man's assessment of the dead scum. The Hokage bent down and wiped the blood off his hand on the man's flak jacket. He spat into the dead man's crater of a face before turning to the tracker. Sarutobi turned to an equally pissed Inuzuka tracker and Anbu pair and delivered his orders. Come, Hana, let's go to the next perpetrator. Hi, Hokage-sama, she frostily growled. The thoughts that someone could do that to someone no older than her little brother ripe in her mind. 6 days before the search, 1 day after death. It was dark now, the sun had set and he had no shelter or nourishment. More importantly, he had to find some shoes, ninja sandals preferably. He stalked through the forest, no longer the prey, but now the predator. He gripped his sword ready for anything or anyone that would dare try to take his life. The moon shone bright above him, giving everything in the forest a strange glow. Naruto looked down at his robe, surprised it gave him a ghostly appearance, especially with the faintly pulsating glow of the symbols on his robe. Why are we wandering in fire country in the dark? He heard a shrill voice pierce the darkness. Naruto snapped his head in attention and pinpointed the area which the sound originated from. Hush your voice, Inari. A Konoha patrol could find us. Naruto heard an older woman say. Come on, let's go try to set up camp. Nice going, Inari, we could have been found. Naruto heard another girl whisper in a hushed tone. No one asked you for your opinion, Bayako. The girl now revealed as Inari grumbled. Perfect, he thought as he trailed them. The group finally stopped in a small clearing surrounded by trees. The older woman, who Naruto presumed was a Junin sensei. She had dark brown hair from what he could tell and a hard face. She had a fit body, though, giving Naruto the impression she was no slacker. Inari and her friend, Bayako, he observed, had small builds and poor weapon skills. He noticed as Bayako spun a kunai by its ring on her finger before it went flying into the woods. Naruto froze as the kunai landed a couple meters away from him. Crap, am I compromised? While Naruto was not scared, he was cautious of the approaching girl. The fact that he was wearing white made it worse. So, imagine his surprise when afterwards the girl stared straight in his direction and disregarded him completely. Well, that was lucky, he thought. Naruto was now crouching on top of a tree branch, after some difficult getting on it without making his skin crack. Inari, since you could have alerted us, you had to go look for firewood in hostile territory. Inari slumped her shoulders while her other 2 teammates stayed around the camp. Naruto looked at the other boy. He seemed to be somewhat skillful for a genin at least. Naruto stalked Inari into the forest, watching her mutter underneath her breath while quickly picking up branches. He observed her, waiting for the moment to strike. Finally he struck, grabbing her within a hold with his blade at her neck. If you scream, I'll cut your head off, do you understand? The girl nodded, her head, tears beginning to spill from her eyes. Good, he whispered. Inari was frightened. She had been carelessly picking up firewood, and this strange man had captured her. Was he going to rape her or turn her into the slavers for a profit? She decided to try and calm herself as she heard his words. She had to figure out a way to get out of this bind. She reached down slowly to her kunai pouch for a weapon, but meeped as the man pressed the blade into her neck. What did I say? Naruto whispered into her ear sternly, before removing her belt and that pouches attached to it. He stored it into his robe, and tried to whisper reassuringly to her. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Just don't scream out. Let's go visit your friends. Quote. Inari's eyes widened in surprise. The man had snuck up on her entire group? It shouldn't be possible. Her sensei was an elite Junin from Iwa. She tried to determine facts about her abductor. He seemed to be around her height, so they were about the same age, or he was a midget. Meaning, that he should have been around her age, voice changer. She thought. No, what would someone with a voice changer be doing in the middle of the forest? She quickly shot down that idea. Inari looked down at the hand of her attacker and noticed many startling bandages. Is this guy some sort of victim? She tried to piece together. Then there was his voice. It was the spiciest thing she had ever heard. His voice reminded her of a sandpaper, dry and rough. She suddenly felt herself being nudged back into the direction of the campsite. I'm sorry guys for getting caught. Inari thought, downtrodden by her capture. The campsite was now in sight. She walked with the shadowy boy behind her into the clearing. Inari, what took you so long? You took such a long time, we had to get firewood ourselves. Her sensei scolded her. At this point her sensei noticed the telltale signs of tears on her face. Inari? She said worriedly, did she come off a little bit too angry? I'm sorry, Mikami-sensei. were Inari's only words as she now fully appeared in the clearing, a white sword held at her throat. Immediately, Inari's teammates and sensei were on high guard. Silence reigned throughout the campsite, not even one owl hooting. To say that Makimi was surprised was an understatement. She held the idea that her student might have been captured by some sort of bandit in mind, but by this? She would have never expected like that to hold her student hostage. Across the clearing, she studied the boy threatening the safety of her student. He had his head over Inari's shoulder, giving him a semi-good look of his face. Well, what she could make of it. His face was covered in bandages except his left eye, an icy, cold cerulean, she noted. Trying to defuse the situation, Makimi tried to save her student's life. "Just let her go, we'll even let you get away," she said, coming off somewhat arrogant, not what she wanted to sound like at all. "You think you can threaten me? Think about the girl." He motioned to her ever slightly bleeding neck. "If you hurt her, Bayako said, before she was interrupted. "Bayako, quiet, what do you want?" Makimi said, her teeth clenched in anger. "Good, that's a little better. Now comply or I'll slash her throat," Naruto said. Inside, Naruto was at turmoil with himself. Had he really just threatened to cut this poor girl's throat? You have to survive, there's no helping it. You can't watch out for all the ants on the sidewalk, can you? Naruto steeled his resolve and made his demands. He pointed at the boy. "Take off your sandals." The genin quickly took off his sandals and placed them in front of them. "Good," Naruto said, "now put all your weapons and rations into that bag." He pointed to Bayako's bag. "All our rations and weapons?" Both the male genin and Bayako hissed. "Be reasonable. That'll leave us with nothing," Makimi said. "Fine." Naruto adhered. "Half your rations and weapons." Grudgingly, the group put their weapons and rations into the bag. "Now, you." Naruto pointed at Bayako. "I have a name, you know. It's Bayako." The girl angrily shouted. "I know," Naruto said nonchalantly. "Now pick up the sandals and the bag and put them right in front of me." Bayako picked up the bag and the sandals with a disgusted face that she had to pick up boys' sandals, but nonetheless did her job. "Now release her," Inari's sensei said hurriedly. "Not so fast. Release the jutsu on the fire," Naruto demanded. "What are you talking about?" Makimi said, gritting her teeth. "Don't play coy. There's no way the fire can't produce smoke or smell," Naruto cleverly deduced. Makimi furrowed her brows in anger, as she preformed the set of hand signs needed to dispel the jutsu. "There, now let us go, or a patrol will find us soon," Makimi said. They were running out of time now and they had to move fast. "Good luck," Naruto said before he removed the blade and pushed the girl into Bayako. Naruto melded into the forest, leaving the Iwa team behind him. Makimi quickly threw a timed explosive tag on the area, before grabbing her genin and running. Makimi thought about quickly dispatching the thief to get their gear back, however, she found that he had no chakra signature. A ghost of the forest. She thought to herself, a chill going down her spine. The search. Sarutobi had just crashed into Kyan Sato's apartment through the window, shattering the glass. The man was having a late Sunday lunch with his family. Sarutobi's Anbu followed shortly, quickly taking a black bag out and placing it on Kyan's head. Following up was a quick and brutal efficient punch to the gut, disabling him. Sarutobi looked around the room. The man's two children were hiding in their mother's arms, burying their faces into her chest. Sarutobi studied the family, before looking at the limp Kyan. "Bag him and drag him," he thought to himself. He looked at the tearful of Kyan's wife, a decent-looking woman named Rina. She was also a shinobi from what he remembered of the files he had spent hours studying, so he would know every one of his subordinates. "Rina-san." He cleared his throat. "Your husband has done some very bad things. These things are laws that if broken have repercussions that equal death." He delivered. "If your husband cooperates with us, he might just live, might." Rina looked at the limp body of her husband and hugged her children closer. No doubtedly they heard the Hokage as well. Rina nodded her head in acceptance, sobbing softly. "Come, to the T&I department." They shunshined out of the apartment, arriving in front of interrogation headquarters. The Anbu lifted Kyan over his shoulder and walked inside. Sarutobi took out his pipe before lighting it with a lighter. He felt too drained to use any chakra, due to all the information he had learned. Sighing heavily, he turned and entered the building. Sarutobi walked through the dimly lit halls, the lights flickering on and off. While the building could function properly, it gave incoming victims feelings of fear and intense anxiety. The fact that the building's atmosphere was fairly humid was just another staple in the victim's fear. He found the room he was looking for and was saluted by two masked interrogation specialists. They opened the door for him and he slid in, taking a seat in front of the special one-way window. "Has Ibiki started yet?" he asked Inoichi Yamanaka, who was sitting down as well, sipping a cold glass of water. "He's gathering a few materials needed before he starts the show," Inoichi replied. "What did this guy do to warrant you watching his interrogation?" "You don't need to know, Yamanaka-san," the Hokage said, with no reaction for Inoichi to try to gauge the reason. Inoichi frowned, but accepted it. If the Hokage wanted to keep something secret, then it was his decision. Both men looked at Ibiki walk in with his long, black trench coat, his stature intimidating to all that would be lucky enough to meet him. Ibiki sat down, shuffling the files in his hands while laying them out on the table. Two Anbu walked in from the opposing door across from Ibiki with a bagged Kaien. They pushed him into the seat across from Ibiki and undid the bag on his head. "I haven't done anything. Let me go. What do you want from?" came his protest. "I'll be asking the questions." Kaien finally heard. He turned his face to face the gravelly voice and was going to scream more objections, until he realized who it was. Kaien turned as pale as a sheet, his attention on the man before him. "Good, now that I have your attention we can start. We have your undeniable proof that on October 10th, you beat Naruto Uzumaki in an alleyway." "No way," he protested indignantly. "Fine, you can be that way. Do it," Ibiki shouted into the other room. A couple of loud screams coming from the other room, distinctly a woman and children. From Ibiki's side of the room, the door opened and a man with a brown paper bag entered. He put it down on the table. "Do you want to see what's in the bag?" Ibiki said sinisterly. Fearing the contents of the bag, Kaien nodded his head in disapproval. "Come on, it could be important." Ibiki chuckled darkly, and shoved the bag in front of Kaien on the table. Deciding to take a risk, he opened the bags and nearly vomited at the contents inside. He swung his arm back in disgust, spilling the contents of his bag. 3 bloody fingers rolled out, 2 children and a woman's finger with a wedding ring attached to it. Kaien instantly knew who it was. Avoiding the blood, Kaien picked up the fingers and began sobbing. "Please, I'll do what you want. Just don't hurt them anymore." He continued to sob deeply. "Good, nice to see you'll be cooperating with us today, Sato-san," Ibiki replied with a jolly voice. "I'm going to give you a piece of paper and a pen now," he said sternly. "I want you to write down all the names you can remember from who helped you beat up Uzumaki-kun and where he is now." The man used his shirt to dry his tears. Afterwards, he picked up the pen and began writing down names. After 5 minutes, he stopped and looked up, looking tired with pink, puffy eyes. "That's all the names I could remember. Can I please go see my family?" he asked quietly. "I don't think so, Sato-san. You made such an easy choice to go harm Uzumaki-kun. I think you can make another choice." Sato watched Ibiki take out from the manila folder 2 photographs of his children from the folder. "No, no, no," Kaien cried. "You can't make me do this, please. Have mercy. Come on," Ibiki said, playing the good guy. "You're so good at making choices, it should be easy. I can't do it, you ask me the impossible. Please, I can't do this. Take me instead," he desperately cried. "Sorry, no deal, Sato-san. If you don't choose one of them in the next 10 seconds, they both get it." Sato argued furiously, but Ibiki kept counting down, ignoring Kaien's pleas of repentance. 10, 9, 8, please, you can't. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, please, I would choose fast, Kaien. 1, 0, no, moaned Kaien in disbelief and sadness. He began heavily sobbing into his arms, muttering underneath his breath for forgiveness. "Well, I see we're done here. Men, get this man acquainted with one of our fine jail cells," Ibiki said as he straightened out the manila folder and took the list of names. The 2 guards snickered before lifting the broken man up and escorting him out of the room. Sarutobi turned his head to see Ibiki enter the room, jacket in his hand and pouring himself in a generous glass of water. Ibiki took a long, hard sip before putting the empty glass on the table. "It's so nice and cool in here. Torturing someone gets me really going, you know?" Ibiki said. Mind me asking Ibiki-kun, was that all real? Will that man's 2 children really die? Sarutobi asked. Ibiki looked surprised at the question, but laughed a little. I enjoy the finer aspects of torture, Hokage-sama. While I do know how to break a couple bones and rip off some fingernails, I excel at the torture of the mind. The screams were some recordings we have from anonymous people, be them men, women, or children. The fingers? The Hokage questioned. Courtesy of our fine development department. Ibiki said. Ah, was Sarutobi's intelligent response. And I assume you're holding the man in the cell for Enko-chan? Ibiki nodded his head, confirming Sarutobi's thoughts. Very well, continue. Sarutobi demanded. Here is the list of names, Hokage-sama. Ibiki slid the list of names to the Hokage. Sarutobi studied the list intently, nodding his head at the list of names. This is very disappointing. I know some of the people on this list. I always thought they were good people. Sarutobi said, somewhat guiltily. It's been a long day. I can't continue now, it's too dark, and my ninjas need their rest. I'll continue this search in a couple hours after some shut-eye. Dismissed, everyone. Sarutobi bellowed out, his Anbu saluted him on his way out. 6 days before the search, 1 day after death. Naruto glided through the trees like a phantom. The bag was slung over his shoulders. He now had enough food and weapons for a bit more than 2 people. He felt pride in his accomplishments. After his ordeal, he had developed the mentality of, do whatever one needs to do to survive. He stopped and climbed up a tree. He didn't need any patrols spotting him, even if his stealth skills were legendary back in Konoha. Konoha, he paused at the thought. He felt anger, but most of it was replaced by his feelings of indifference. Konoha didn't want him? He didn't need Konoha. He was sure, though, he would extract his revenge in the future. He needed shelter. He was too tired to build a makeshift camp. He felt like he was going to drop to the floor and sleep. Deciding quickly, Naruto went back to the cave, entering the foreboding cavern. He was breathing heavily now, his vision heavy, everything was spinning. He was scared of sleeping. Who was to say he would wake up? Naruto stumbled to the side, using his arm as a support against the cave walls. He slumped onto the ground using the bag as a comfortable cushion. Naruto tried to hold on, but it was all for naught as he was pulled into sleep. Dreaming. Where am I? Naruto wondered out loud. Why your dream, of course. Naruto snapped his head in attention to see the Shinigami sitting on his stone throne. Oh, Shinigami-sama, Naruto said, as he visibly relaxed, his shoulders drooping into relaxation. Shinigami-sama? The death god raised a non-existent eyebrow. That's new, I like that Shinigami-sama, and might I say, I'm very impressed with your willpower. Naruto raised his head, tilting his head in a questioning manner. Oh yes, back in the forest. The wave of sleep you felt was me calling out to you. You were supposed to fall to sleep on top of that tree, but you were strong enough to get back to the cave, which might I add kills 2 humans with 1 swing for me. Huh? Naruto said. Ah, I'm rambling, but what is important is what you want, Naruto. What I want? Naruto looked confused, but quickly grasped the meaning of the death god's words. But there's a price for everything, right? Naruto realized. What an astute individual you are, Naruto-kun. Death god chuckled darkly. So, Naruto said, cutting to the neck of the question. What do you want in return, Shinigami-sama? You already have my soul. Ha 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 ha. How funny, I don't have your soul. No, that would not do. Oh, that's nice to know. Naruto nodded. So, what do you want instead? No deal, I'll tell you afterwards whether you want to know the information or not. I accept. Tell me the changes of my body and abilities I'm capable of currently. Oh, you don't want to know the fate of your father? Or where your mother currently is? At the context of the last question, Naruto looked like he was struck, even though 97% of his body was covered in bandages. Just tell me what I want. Naruto said somewhat angrily, even with his cold tone. He, well let's see. I didn't give you any fancy powers, or as you humans like to call them, Kekkei Genkei. Naruto seemed to be somewhat disappointed, but it did not matter. Regardless, he would become powerful. I gave you something much better. Naruto cocked his head up in wonder. What could be this amazing gift? This power, I have dubbed the infinity limit. That sounds weird, Naruto thought. Infinity suggests endlessness, but limit means that something is finite, only going up so high. how contradictory. The infinity limit will give you power, more power than you could ever imagine. This power, the power of endless potential, the Shinigami whispered. Endless potential, Naruto said, shock evident on his face from his widened eye. Naruto realized the value of such a skill. Long after his enemies or allies had reached their pinnacle of power, he would still be advancing in power. I've never been one to throw power around. No, you will have to earn it, like everything else you have done. I wouldn't expect less, Shinigami-sama, thank you. Well, let's see, other abilities. You already know one void technique and another subconsciously. I do? Was Naruto's confused response. Yes, I believe you call it shadow melding. The true name, which is void blitzing, however, cannot be used in battle. The death god chuckled in his mind. While that was not true, he couldn't give out all the freebies. You were teaching me techniques even before what happened? Naruto said, his gaze not betraying his suspicions. Well, of course, I have to protect my investment. Enough of that, though, wouldn't you like to know what else you're capable of? Naruto nodded his head in response, taking in every word that Shinigami had to offer. Now, since you've been such a good sport, I think I'll tell you some more information to restore your appearance as well as a new technique. The ominous figure paused, gauging Naruto's reaction, pleased to see that the boy was patient. Inside, though, Naruto was thrilled beyond reason. An ability to restore his vitality? The ability that you unconsciously use is something I like to call siphon. Using this technique, one can drain the life energy or chakra, as you humans call it, into one's self. The Shinigami explained, what you did while you were sleeping was sucking the living energy from your surroundings. After your genesis, you proceeded to suck the life out of everything around you. Naruto looked like he was about to say something, but the Shinigami made a slashing motion with his hand, stopping Naruto. Questions in the end, and yes, you can control it while asleep, but that will take some skill. You no longer have to sleep or eat, but I recommend you do so, but eating will be difficult. While you do not have to do either of those life-essential things, it is absolutely vital that you drink. You still need to drink. Be it blood water, juice, or poison. If it's liquid, it's good. Purees don't count, by the way. So, siphon. I guess the best way to describe it is a feeling of hunger. First of all, you need skin contact or use of a capable medium. It's something you have to experience for yourself. Can you explain the feeling? Naruto asked. Imagine yourself coaxing something out, something like a tornado with the point of it on your palm. If you're really skilled, you can kill someone in less than 3 seconds. However, you need a clear mind to exercise this skill, and that is where the medium comes in handy. The Shinigami paused. With the medium you can use the object to drain energy, though, the amount is significantly lower than a flawless siphon. Now, the changes to your body. Ever hear the quote, the eyes are the mirror of the soul? Naruto nodded his head for yes in response to the Shinigami's query, wondering about the purpose of the quote. Well, that's somewhat true. For humans, your energy is a mixture of physical and spiritual energy. Spiritual energy is what humans call it. I prefer soul energy. And since I only have one eye, my energy is incomplete, right? Naruto cleverly answered. Your analytical skills are quite something, for a human, anyway. The Shinigami murmured. This meaning, you cannot fully access your own energy. To be honest, about 50% of your energy is sealed. So consider your current 50% as your new 100. While such news would have deterred anyone, Naruto's will to excel could not have burned any brightly at that moment. Do not remove your bandages as well. Doing so will unseal all your energies and you will cease to exist. Those words scared Naruto more than he would care to admit. Cease to exist, not to die or to live, but to just not be. However, once you become good enough at controlling your power, you might be able to take them off without repercussion. Naruto seemed to lighten up at this. He might be able to feel the wind on his skin one day. Another ability you have is to incorporate the power of others into your body. I wouldn't suggest going overboard, though, and doing so is double-edged. For example, if you absorb a being weaker than yourself, there is a risk being weaker. The same applies with stronger beings as well. Now, the bandages on your body and power levels correspond to each other. The more bandages you unravel, the more power you gain. That's pretty self-explanatory. Alright, so questions? The Shinigami said, wiping an imaginary drop of sweat from his brow. Alright, so how do I perfect siphon? Naruto asked. About 1.5 kilometers from your cave, there are 40 to 50 souls, most likely bandits. You can go practice there." Having one of his questions answered, Naruto decided to ask another one. "So, can my sword do anything?" "Well, besides cutting and slashing, it has other abilities, although I'm not going to tell you. That would spoil the surprise," the Shinigami said gleefully. Naruto was surprised at the death god's somewhat jolly voice, well as jolly as a cold wind sweeping through dead trees could sound. "Oh, and why is my blood black?" At this the death god looked actually surprised, and he adopted a thinking pose. He rested his chin in his hand with his arm perched against the stone arm of the throne. "That has nothing to do with me, black blood you say? Huh, even the strangest of demons have purple blood, how peculiar. Well, that's one thing I don't know, you'll have to figure it out yourself. How would you describe the feeling of absorbing someone? Be careful, like I said. The feeling of siphoning and incorporation are similar. The difference is with incorporation, you let your life energy overwhelm the other person." "What did you mean by, good, you came back to the cave?" Naruto questioned. "When you accepted my powers I bathed you in my energies. The cave has some of my lingering energies, and since you're so talented," the Shinigami chuckled darkly, "you should be able to perform an unconscious siphon and collect it. Although you won't get all of it, you should get enough, so there is just a little bit left." The dreamscape began to turn gray now. In all honesty, it was a pitch black before with the only figures Naruto and the Shinigami. Cracks began to form in the gray. Fog seemed to blanket everything, quickly covering everything. Naruto looked at where the Shinigami was. He could feel himself quickly slipping and everything becoming lighter. "Oh, and Naruto." Naruto looked into the fog and was spooked by how the Shinigami's piercing yellow eyes were only visible, and only turned to stare at the supernatural sight. "Be wary of Kitsune." Then everything broke into white with the last thing Naruto saw was the giant cage, containing the nine-tailed fox. 4 hours later, the search. Sarutobi opened his eyes in an almost practiced manner from his 4-hour slumber. He brought his hands to his face to wipe away the rheum, from his eyes. He sported dark circles underneath his eyes, a combination of sleepless nights and worrying over his surrogate grandson. He had sent out the Anbu to detain everyone on the list and try to gather more names from them. Between the time he had went to sleep and the time he had awoken, all the people had been nabbed. If one was to wake up in the middle of the night and look across the street at the secret interrogation and torture compound, people could be seen dragged in by strange masked men and women. The Hokage grabbed his robe and slung it over his office. At this time no one was in, except for him that was. He walked downstairs to the faculty office. He had packed some dumplings in the fridge that he never had a chance to eat yesterday. He took out the little morsels and placed them inside the microwave. Sarutobi decided to sit down and think over past events. Yesterday had been a beautiful day that had been suddenly downcast for him, due to the disappearance and quite possibly the bloody end of his grandson. He sincerely hoped that wasn't the case. If there was a god, he prayed to any supreme being, wishing for Naruto's safety. The microwave beeped, alerting Sarutobi to the finished dumplings. He took the microwavable styrofoam box out and placed it on the table, the heat barely tickling his calloused hands. He went over to the refrigerator and fished out a bottle of water and took a green tea solution from a nearby dispenser. He poured the fine solution into the cold water and shook it. The color reminded him of natural chakra. Sarutobi thought back to the time he tried to persuade Minato to let him perform the seal instead, so that Naruto would at least grow up with one parent. It was unforeseen that Kushina would escape from death. He walked over to the counter and grabbed a pair of wooden chopsticks. The Hokage broke them in half, before eating the morsels with haste. He pecked the corners of his mouth with a napkin and took a long drink from the green tea drink. After waiting a while for the food to set in, he stood up and shunshined to the T&I department. He walked down the long corridor, now well lit, a decent change in his opinion. He went into the main room, an office with numerous televisions, each linked to a camera in a room. Each televisions displayed tortures being interrogated. Be they enemy spies or the recent splurge of civilians, each person inevitably gave in. Sarutobi was warmly greeted by Inoichi, sitting back in his chair with a cup of coffee. "Ah, Hokage-sama, good morning." "Good morning, Inoichi-kun. Any progress?" "Actually, Hokage-sama, yes. This man right here." Inoichi controlled the computer and sent the feed to the main screen. While a little blurry, the picture recalibrated itself, depicting a clear picture. Sarutobi studied the man intently, the thought that he was connected to Naruto's disappearance. Sarutobi knew this man, an ice cream cart vendor that sold ice cream during the hot days in the park. The man was kind, though. He lost a daughter, an unborn child, and a wife to the Kyuubi attack. More than enough reason to go after Naruto. So what does he know? He came to us willingly, Hokage-sama. He knows Naruto's current location and where to find him. Inoichi said. Come, I'll set you up. I figure you want to hear this yourself. Inoichi escorted the Hokage to the man's room. Sarutobi opened the door, making a soft clicking noise, causing the vendor to look up in what might have been relief or fear. Under certain circumstances I would say nice to see you, Kobayashi-san. Sarutobi drew in Kobayashi's appearance, ragged with red, sleepless eyes and dark circles. A stubble growing on his chin, something that Sarutobi knew set Kobayashi off. The man was always well groomed. However, this is not the case. Unlike others, you have come free of charge. You are not even identified, so why are you here? Guilt, Hokage-sama, guilt, was Kobayashi's tired response. While personally I did not harm Naruto's person, I did nothing either to prevent it. Did you know my daughter was 8 at the time when the Kyuubi attacked? Same age as Naruto-san. She would be 16 now. Kobayashi said, somewhat regretfully, a tone full of sadness. That 1 week ago, I couldn't bear the sadness and loneliness, so I turned to drink. And you drank too much? Sarutobi presumed, as the man nodded his head. The darker feelings I had bottled within me, they ran loose, allowing me to do what I wanted, but I guess in the end it was Naruto's age that saved him. The man finished. So tell me from the beginning, what happened? Sarutobi questioned. I went out drinking with my friends. They decided to get me, to cheer me up since they knew that I lost my family. However, my friends aren't exactly fans of the container, too blinded by loss to see the Naruto is just a boy. The man paused and took a breath. Eventually, the drinking got heavier, and before I knew it we were engaged in some sort of combined effort to effectively end Naruto. Sarutobi sucked in his breath. He already knew that Kobayashi-san didn't do anything, but could felt some disappointment that the good man was involved. I guess good men do fall to their devils eventually. Sarutobi said as he waited for Kobayashi to continue. Well, I'm sure that you know Naruto was taken to 2 separate alleys and tortured, right? Sarutobi nodded his head sharply, allowing the Hokage hat to shadow his eyes ever so slightly. To the civilians and small amount of ninja there, this wasn't enough to sat their vengeance. So what happened? Sarutobi said somewhat impatiently. They decided to burn him to death. The Hokage's grip on the wooden chair snapped it, the splinters flying across the room. Can you show me where he is now? Hi, Genesis. True to the Shinigami's word, Naruto felt slightly more energetic from collecting the deathly energy in the cave. So, the bandits were about 1.5 kilometers away? If that was true, then he would have to do some patrolling. It was too dark inside the cave. He grabbed the bag of supplies and using the feel of the ninja sandals to help him, he guided this feet into each ninja sandal. A comfortable fit, he thought to himself. He stepped outside, testing the sandals, striding, then eventually picking up in speed. The Shinigami's energy must have healed me enough, so that my skin doesn't crack when I perform vigorous activity. Good, he noted to himself. Remembering the Shinigami's words, Naruto took out a water bottle from the bag and unscrewed it. Naruto used his free hand to slightly shift the bandages on his face to allow his mouth to drink the liquid. Curious about his complexion, he touched the skin around his mouth, cringing at the feel. It was rough and hard. While it was not as bad as a couple hours ago, definitely an improvement, it was still ugly and scarring. Pushing such thoughts from his mind, Naruto chugged the entire bottle, quenching his thirst. He took out a ration bar and broke it in half, nibbling on it. It tasted like cardboard peppered with dried cranberries in it. While the cranberries were there to distract the eater to focus on the sweetness, the cardboard quality simply overwhelmed it. Regardless, he chewed on, swallowing the bland ration. He quickly washed his mouth with the water, getting rid of any debris that would have been left in his mouth by the ration. Naruto removed some of the bandages on his index finger, wincing at the shriveled skin. He put it in his mouth, checking for anything left. Along the way he cut his finger in his mouth, allowing his black blood to flow. This isn't blood at all. It's. Naruto's train of thought was interrupted by the discovery of his sharp teeth. Huh, what am I, a shark now? This turned out to be untrue, seeing as only his canines had become incredibly sharpened. He was brought out of his musing by the shriek of a woman coming southeast of his direction. I found my bandits. As he put the bag back in the cave and gripped his sword. The robed phantom traveled through the trees, gliding and weaving through the trees. Naruto finally arrived at the outskirts of the bandit camp, about 30 of them if he was certain, and 20ish children and women in cages. There were tents set all around, the many lanterns and fires illuminating everything. He would have to be careful unless he wanted to be detected. Joe, Kaiba, you two have guard duty first, get to it. Minace, Ryu, you two head in the other direction. The bandit leader shouted. Naruto watched, hidden by the tree as the 4 bandit guards stalked off into the forest. He decided he would trail the duo known as Joe and Kaiba first. The 2 men decided to stop 100 meters away, a good distance to see if they were needed back at the camp. Hey, Kaiba, I'm a little tired from today's fun. I'm going to get some shut-eye, the man said as he laid back on a nearby tree, letting his head rest. Chuckling at his friend, Kaiba nodded his head and agreed, turning his head the other direction to scan the surroundings. Naruto waited, and true to his words, Joe fell asleep in 5 minutes, snoring loudly. Taking this opportunity, Naruto snuck behind the tree Joe was and undid the bandages on the tips of his fingers. In the moonlight, Naruto looked at his fingernails, marveling at their now pointed, black appearance. Musing himself from his observations, Naruto took his hands and placed them lightly on Joe's arms. Think of a tornado, a suction on my palm, Naruto thought. Through his concentration, he eventually gained a state of tranquility. He could feel it, the man's energy was much better than water, almost intoxicating. Hungry, Naruto increased the rate of the extraction, pulling out all the life energy of the man and killing him. Kaiba turned his head to his friend, noticing his lack of snoring. Hey Joe, you awake? The bandit whispered in the darkness. Hey, come on, wake up. It's my turn for some shut-eye. Kaiba walked over and shook Joe. Kaiba watched with fear as his friend fell over on his side, dead to the world. What the H was all Kaiba could say before his world turned black. Behind him, Naruto kneeled down and began absorbing the man's energy. Naruto had easily grasped the process of siphon and had easily distracted one of the 2 other guards with a noise he made in the forest. He used scare tactics by pretending to be a ghost on the man left at the camp, easily draining his energy while looking into his scared eyes. Such a feeling made him feel powerful, like the predator instead of the prey. It was exhilarating. Soon the man's compatriot had returned, and by dropping out of a tree and quickly knocking him out, Naruto drained him as well. While Naruto had dispatched all 4 people with ease, how was he going to get into the camp? Wait a second, void blitzing. Patting himself on the back for such a good idea, Naruto phased out of sight. By now the bandit camp's main fire was ousted by water, and only the lanterns remained lit. The sounds of cruel laughter could be heard from the main tent, the men undoubtedly doing sick, perverse things to their prisoners. I'll save those bastards for last, Naruto thought, and entered the first tent. There laid a fat man sleeping on a sleeping bag, 3 girls in a cage next to him, all silently sobbing at the fates that awaited them. These bastards, unforgivable, Naruto thought, promising them all death. Naruto walked over to the man, hidden in the void. Can I use abilities while hidden? Might as well find out. Much to Naruto's glee, he was able to. He began to vigorously drain the man, not seeing the Shinigami's sickly yellow energy begin to envelop the man. Shit, Naruto thought as he reined in his calm. I got too caught up and let my emotions run wild. I almost incorporated this piece of scum, he thought disgustedly. The man yelped out, alerting the girls in the cage. He heaved, before his eyes rolled into the back of his head, no longer with the living. I'll come back for you, I promise, Naruto said, as he looked at the somewhat happier girls. And so it continued as such, Naruto sneaking into each tent, becoming more disgusted by the bandits and draining their life energy as payment for their sins. He finally reached the final tent. It was larger than the rest, at least 3 times bigger. He could see the silhouettes of 3 men sitting in chairs, in front of them, the shadow of a girl dancing. Naruto entered the tent, swinging the flap open, badly startling the bandit leaders. "It's just the wind, continue," the main leader said, grinning lecherously. Naruto would kill this man last. He observed all of them. Naruto decided to kill the man on the left first, the drunk. He walked over to the man and placed his finger on the top of his neck, leeching the energy out. The bandit felt coldness descend upon him, but quickly excused it for the drink taking its hold. "Hey guys, I feel a little sleepy," the bandit said, before his body shifted in a manner that caused him to fall over on his side. Immediately, the two other bandits were attentive, checking on their friend. "He's dead, Kuma is dead," the thin bandit cried, but immediately turned his head to his fellow leader. "Who could have it been? There have been tensions between us, but I don't think neither of us could do this." "And that's where you're wrong, Akiba," the muscular bandit leader said. "You bastard," the man now identified as Akiba shouted. The dancer, now frightened, tried to make herself invisible in the background by taking refuge behind a chest. "How could you do this? To your friends?" Akiba swore angrily as he dropped to the ground, huffing. "It's quite simple, Prophet. Although, it's strange, Kuma wasn't supposed to die, but to go off into sleep. As long as you keep moving, the agent should make you go to sleep faster." "And what were you planning to do? Kill us while we were sleeping?" Akiba whispered out, drawn for breath. "Well, that's the only thing I could do to grant my best friends a quick death." The man smirked. "You've always been an ambitious bastard, Katashi," were Akiba's final words as he fell to sleep. Naruto went over the man, and calmly sucked out his chakra, having it at a fairly good control after using it on 30+ persons. Katashi watched with morbid fascination as Akiba's body began to jerk around. However, what was more frightening was the figure that seemed to materialize, standing over Akiba's body. The cloaked figure stood, his fingers twitching. "Short," thought Katashi as he backed up. He pulled out his knife and grabbed the dancer roughly in a hold. Katashi held it to her throat, the blade shaking. To be honest, he was scared out of his mind. "Stand back, or else the bitch gets it," he shakily said. The thing before him had a voice like crinkling leaves. My Katashi, what happened to your bravado? Scared of something you can't see?" Naruto taunted. Shut up," he shouted, his mind racing. I need something binding to get this demon away from me." "That's it, leave now," he said more confidently. "If you don't, I'll kill this innocent girl." Fine, Naruto said as he backed off. Looking triumphant, Katashi pulled out his trump card. "Swear it on your demon name." Inside, Naruto was giggling like mad. This man thought he was a demon. He might as well entertain him. "I swear on my name that I shall not harm you, human," Naruto hissed out for effect. Katashi waited for Naruto to leave, and once he finally left, he released the girl, letting her land on the ground on her palms. The girl glared at her slaver, anger marring her pretty face. She would get the bastard back and free her village. Katashi let out a heavy sigh and fell back onto his chair, wiping the sweat on his brow. He suddenly felt ill, blood coughing out of his mouth. He looked down to see an impeccably white-colored blade stick out of his chest. He could feel it, his life slipping out of him. He was going to die. The blade pulled out with a clean swoosh, Naruto's ominous presence behind the man. How? Katashi asked, while Naruto wiped the blood off his blade on Katashi's clothing. "You made many mistakes. 1. You captured a bunch of innocents with the intention of selling them all for profit with your goons. 2. You betray your friends. 3. Naruto leaned in close to Katashi's ear. You assumed I'm a demon." Naruto chuckled darkly. "Miss." Naruto's voice brought the attention of the girl, who was transfixed on his person. "Here, take vengeance." Naruto kicked the small blade in her direction. Shakily, the girl took the knife and looked at it. With some hesitation, she plunged it into Katashi's chest, robbing his of the little life he had left. "Thank you," the girl whispered. Was Naruto's response. "I said thank you," she said much stronger. "Don't worry, it was a mutual benefit. I got kill a bunch of bastards and gained something valuable." "Why, you killed all of them?" was the girl's nervous response. "Yes, unless you wanted them to live," Naruto said, walking out of the tent. Gaping at her savior, she quickly followed him. Naruto went from tent to tent in his glory, freeing each person. While they were first wary of him, praised him with adoration when he broke the lock on each cage with his sword. When Naruto freed them all, he turned to leave, but was stopped by the girl. who had thrown a cloak around her to hide her barely clad body. "Wait, please. Tell us, hero, what is your name?" she called out. "What makes me a hero? I could just as easily turn around and kill you all," Naruto said. "Because I know you won't," the woman said, her face drawn in tight and knowing. "So, tell me your name." "Someone told me it's not polite to demand someone's name without giving yours first." The girl blushed, though it was invisible in the light of the moon. "My name is Kasumi." "Kasumi," Naruto said, as if tasting the name. "Listen, for I have saved your lives and may seek you out one day. My name is Phantom." Naruto melded into the forest, thoroughly creeping out everyone in the camp. "Wow, so young, but so dangerous," Kasumi thought to herself, before ordering everyone to ransack the camp for supplies and wealth. The search. Sarutobi clicked his tongue in frustration. One of the interrogation officers had told him he had something he had wanted to see. All the Sandaime wanted to do was find his grandson, and hold him tight and tell him it was going to be okay. He followed the officer down the hall and took a left into another wing of torture rooms. "This better be worth it," the Hokage said, antsy from wanting to go out with Kobayashi-san. The officer opened the door, revealing a doctor, Sarutobi knew, the same one that said he would get all sorts of ailments from being around Naruto. "This man," the interrogation officer started off, "is an abomination to his trade. Inside his apartment we found things like monkey hearts, cow livers, and a dissected baby deer. Including this," the officer said as he pulled out a covered jar. From the contents inside, Sarutobi could make out sloshing, so it was a liquid, although, what did it contain? "Open it," the officer said lowly. Sarutobi took the covered jar and placed it in front of him. What could it be? Slowly and almost deliberately, the Sandaime opened the bag. He looked at the contents of the jar, in shock of what was before him. He looked at the doctor across from him, who had a smug look on his face. "My finest work, if I do say so myself," the doctor proudly said. "Officer, lock this man away for the rest of his life." The officer made his way to the man, but was held back by Sarutobi. "After I've had my time with him." Grinning, the officer walked out of the room, guarding the door. Naruto's eye floated in the jar of preservative liquid, observing the entire session with a quiet intensity. Genesis, 1 day after death, 6 days before the search. Naruto felt invigorated, the power of 30 men flowing through his body. From what he remembered, each life he siphoned brought him closer to the way he looked. How many people, though, he would have to ask the next encounter with the death god. The night was over and the sun now peaked over the horizon. Naruto suddenly realized he had been up for the better part of the night. Fishing a water bottle from the bag, Naruto unscrewed it and emptied the contents into his stomach. He wiped the water bottle out and put it back in the bag. It wouldn't do to waste a good water bottle. He laid back, using the bag as pillow to support his head. He moved on his side, finally falling asleep. Naruto was conscious, and what he knew about dreams was that passed quickly. This was no dream, he was in his mindscape. He looked down at his hands, perfect and unscarred. He touched his face, disappointed that his eye was not there. This was the way he envisioned himself in his dreamscape, he supposed. He turned his head to face a large metal cage with a simple ceiling tag, holding the great beast behind the doors. "Kyuubi," Naruto thought to himself, as if the great beast had heard his thoughts. Its deep rumbling voice answered him. "Kit," Kyuubi called out, its large red eyes piercing the darkness of Naruto's mind. Naruto watched as the silhouette of Kyuubi's large, red body shifted. The kitsune's body seemed to expand outwards before turning into a whirl of movement, until finally stopping. Before Naruto was a pretty, tall woman. She had looks that many women, as his Nei-chan had put it, would kill for. She had a red kimono on with waves of orange and yellow on it, a fiery design. Anko? Naruto thought to himself. She had her hair done in ornate accessories, but nothing too over the top. Her hair was long, falling all the way down to her back. The demoness rushed to the bars, her eyes full of concern. "Naruto, are you alright? I was so worried about you." Instantly, Naruto was on guard, his lone eye analyzing the women. If anything, he had to be careful of Kitsune, the ultimate tricksters. The fact that he was against the queen of Kitsune made him all the more wary of the woman in front of him. Kyuubi scrunched her face in genuine wonder. Why was Naruto so apprehensive toward her? They were practically mother and son, due to the amiable meetings between him and her daughter. "What's wrong, Naruto? Don't you recognize me?" the Kyuubi pleaded. "I'm sorry, but I think this is the first time we've finally met, face to face." Kyuubi paled. What did he mean by that? "Naruto, what do you mean by that? All the fun times we had with Kunari-chan. Don't you remember us?" she asked, her emotions running high. How could he forget them? "I'm sorry," Naruto said. "I believe you're talking about someone else." No, I'm not. Come closer, so I can get a good look at you." Kyuubi pleaded. "I think that would be a bad idea, trickster fox." Those words made Kyuubi blink with surprise and some hurt. "Naruto, why are you being so forgetful? How could you forget all those moments? Stop playing with me." Naruto growled. "I don't know you. This is my first time talking to you. This isn't funny anymore, Naruto, quit it." The woman growled and her eyes started leaking a red mist from her already remarkable ruby-red eyes. "I don't think you understand, I've never met you before, and since you know what I know, what's stopping me from incorporating all your power into my being? It's your entire fault I'm even like this." Naruto roared. The Kyuubi flinched at Naruto's tone and hung her head low. It was true what Naruto said. Everything that happened to him was due to the villagers' hatred for her. "You really don't remember anything?" she said sadly. "I can't say I do," Naruto said. "Please, try to remember, it was all like a dream, you once said?" Naruto closed his eyes, focusing on the Kyuubi's features. He received flashes of red hair and laughter. "I'm sorry, all I remember is red hair and lots of laughter." "Laughter? Laughter is good, concentrate on that," the Kyuubi whispered. More images ran through his mind, this time that of Kyuubi and a little girl around his age. "I remember you, but who is the girl?" At this the Kyuubi frowned. "Why doesn't Naruto remember Kunari? That little girl is my daughter and your best friend, Kunari." "I'm sorry, I still don't remember so much, but I know I had a deep connection with your daughter." "Ha, deep is like saying a canyon is small. My daughter and him were pretty much cuddling each other the entire time. One doesn't forget a bond that deep unless, Shinigami." The Kyuubi growled in her head. "My daughter cares for you a lot. A bit too much. She's been sleeping now for around 2 days now. She couldn't handle the things happening to you and cried herself to sleep." "Well, until next time, Kyuubi-sama." Naruto turned his back to the Fox Empress. "Kyuubi-sama? What happened to Q-chan? Naruto, you went through more things than I ever could without lashing back." She, though as the boy no man, began to walk away. "Wait, Naruto, I have one request for you," the Kyuubi called out. "Please release my daughter from the seal. I don't expect you to do this of your own free will, so I pledge to place you under my tutelage. I agree, though, you must honor one request of mine. You must not tell your daughter my true identity." "Why, though? My daughter cherishes you dearly, she deserves to know." Naruto Uzumaki died at the age of 8 on October 10 on his birthday, after civilians and ninjas of Konoha condemned him to death by fire. Kyuubi bit her lip, but nodded her head in agreement. Naruto was the past. Her daughter would have to discover this knowledge on her own. Even though she knew of the contract between Naruto and the Death God, she doubted the being would harm his fledgling apprentice. "Wait, sweat it on your name, that you will protect my daughter and free her," Kyuubi shouted. "I swear on my name, Charybdi," Naruto began, but was interrupted by the Kyuubi. "Your real name," she growled out. "I swear as Naruto that I shall adhere to our agreement, on the cost of my life." He finished. "I agree, now come here, so that you may free my daughter from this place. You must be careful. Any slight tear could alter the seal, so follow my instructions." Naruto nodded in agreement. He walked over to the seal, waiting for directions. "This area right here, you have to remove that circle and part of the kanji, remember, be careful." Naruto followed the Kyuubi's instructions, his steady hands starting to tear the parts off the seal. "Be careful. I know. That spot right there. I got it. No, not like that. Kyuubi, I can't do this if you keep bugging me." Kyuubi shrugged her shoulders, looking a little sheepish. Naruto continued tearing the seal, painstakingly slow to make no mistakes. Minutes passed and the pair remained quiet. During this time Naruto got to see Kunari sleeping. Cute. Were Naruto's thoughts, a blush warmed his pale face. Kyuubi grinned at Naruto's reaction to her daughter. "Kit, you missed that," said, breaking the long silence. "Damn it, Kyuubi," Naruto said as he accidentally tore off the rest of the required part in one clean swoop. "Huh, wow. Naruto studied the seal. Looking at the corner, he realized that he tore off a bit more of the kanji than necessary. "Oh shit," he said coolly, were the only words that Naruto were able to complete before his mindscape exploded into yellow and crimson lights. The surge. Sarutobi washed his hands in the sink, removing the blood caked underneath his fingernails. He had shown the doctor the finer points of anthropology, which the doctor heartily agreed to. He covered the jar in the black cloth that it had come with and placed it securely on his palm. With a quick surge of chakra, he sealed the jar into his tattoo. Unwilling to have it put anywhere else, he would find a better location for it later. He walked out of the personal washroom and back to Kobayashi, who had been released, but stayed nearby to lead the way to Naruto's location. Sarutobi walked down the hallway and into the main lobby. He acknowledged the secretary with a brief nod of the head and went outside. From what he could tell, it was the afternoon now, as the sun made him squint and adjust his hat for better visibility. To his pleasure, Kobayashi was waiting for him along with some tracking specialist and some forensic specialist he had decided to pick up. "Ready?" Kobayashi asked his leader. "It's a long walk, and I'm not a ninja, so it should take us a while to get there." He apologized. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go," the Hokage commanded, and the group shuffled off in comfortable pace. "We're getting closer now, it should be about 5 more minutes until we're there," Kobayashi said. In total the trip had been close to 1 hour now. Sarutobi recognized where they were. Their path had led them behind the Hokage monument, where a system of caves lied. Sarutobi instantly predicted that if the civilians had immolated Naruto, then they would do it someplace quietly, like cave. Sarutobi knew this because the Hokage monument was perhaps 4 kilometers, a rather large width for anything. It was good to pull surprising facts on other countries' ninja ambassadors anyway. As the group drew closer and closer, Sarutobi saw a slight, but noticeable change in the landscape. The trees seemed to become duller and the leaves less glossy. The grass was not as green, but almost yellow in color. He was not the only one to detect this, as Inuzuka Hana started growling, along with the 3 Heimaru triplets. "At ease, Hana," the Hokage said. The Inuzuka heiress took a deep breath and rolled her shoulders. "Forgive me, this area, it reeks of death and decay." Sarutobi raised his brow at that one. Death and decay? While he was no Inuzuka, he was fairly certain he would be able to tell. They finally arrived. Now up close, Sarutobi understood what Hana meant. The cave seemed to be leaking an evil energy from it. Turning his head to Kobayashi, he observed the man from the corner of his eyes. The man was pale and seemed ready to vomit, as if the feeling in the air was strangling him. On the other side of him, the 3 Heimaru dogs were covering their heads with their paws, all huddled up against each other. And just as sudden as the malicious aura had been there, it quickly disappeared, the howling of an imaginary wind signaling its leave. The Hokage let his should slump slightly now that the presence had hidden. He could still feel its underlying aura in the area, however. Motioning to his left, he jolted the forensic officers out of their shaking stances and commanded them to enter the cave and gather evidence. Finally noticing the entrance of the ground there were sticks and funeral money? He turned his head to Kobayashi, seeking an explanation. Why would Naruto's murderers lay such things for him? The civilians and ninjas who bore animosity to Naruto were not stupid. They understood the concept of how the Kyuubi was sealed, but they didn't believe the child himself. Sarutobi was listening intently, lighting his pipe. Many thought, how could the will of a newborn match that of a 1,000-year-old demon? Simple, they didn't believe so. The fact that kitsune are notorious tricksters didn't help Naruto's case at all. How foolish, the Hokage said, his eyes a storm of anger, the lightning of his gray eyes flashing brilliantly. Many believe that the demon held the child's soul hostage, so that is why there are so many incense sticks on the ground. Sarutobi snorted at this knowledge. It's quite the other way around. Genesis. Naruto felt sore and sweaty. While he was not in any intense pain, he felt somewhat different. It was like he was missing something now, and it was replaced with something else. He shifted his weight and turned around, facing the other direction. His eyes were still closed. He tried to reach through himself, in a spiritual sense. Naruto didn't know what was different, but he knew he was. He finally opened his eye to face a quite naked red-haired girl next to him. Memories flashed through his mind and the deal with the Kyuubi resurfaced. Naruto had to admit, even if he didn't remember everything, he remembered that the girl made his heart feel calmer. Pretty, huh? Naruto felt a voice resonate in his mind. Kyuubi? He thought, but was pulled away now that the girl had awakened. It was almost breathtakingly slow, how the way her red eyes opened and met his. One of the most beautiful things he would ever acknowledge. This moment, though, was ruined by her sudden shriek. Looks like I have someone to share these supplies with now. Naruto thought amusedly. The search. Sarutobi watched as a somewhat shaky pair of forensic scientists exited the cave and advanced toward the Hokage. Report. Sarutobi's voice steely, leaving no room for outside opinion. The authority that he commanded left no room for questions. There were pieces of a chair in there with what I suspect is semi-flame-proof material which was used to bind Naruto. The scientist finished. We also found small traces of oil and gasoline inside along with a large amount of burnt, dead skin cells that of Naruto's. The Hokage's heart clenched at the information. He had suspected the Kyuubi to heal the wounds, but ultimately it must have been too much. Naruto had survived fire before, but this flame must have utterly cooked him. Sir, I have one last thing to report, the scientist said somewhat quietly. The Hokage listened, waiting for any words concerning his grandson. Well, we found no trace of bones or a body for the matter, nothing. The Sandame's blood ran cold. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.